I feel like 2025 wasn't as bad of a year as 2024 when it came to movies. This is maybe the only instance where 2025 was a better year than 2024. Now, when I say 2025 was a better year for movies than 2024, I say that while also acknowledging that, yeah, there were undeniably great movies in 2024, but there were also an unusually large amount of terrible movies that came out in 2024. Joker 2, Madam Web, Megalopolis, Craven the Hunter, Emilia Perez, Unfrosted, Argyle, the list goes on. It was crazy to me how many terrible movies came out in 2024. And I understand that this is most likely because of the 2023 strikes. I understand that fully. But even then, it's just like, damn, it's crazy how many bad movies came out in 2024. And then 2025 comparatively, I feel like there were obviously bad movies. I mean, if there weren't any bad movies, then this video would never exist. But I feel like there weren't as many, like, really awful movies this year. Like, I feel like this year didn't have a Joker 2. It didn't have a Madam Web. Well, it kind of had a Madam Web, I guess. It didn't have, like, an Emilia Perez. It didn't have anything of that sort. It was a better year for movies. There were more good movies this year compared to bad movies. I want to say, like, overall, I think I watched more good movies this year compared to bad movies. Which is why, for the first time ever, I am also doing a best movies list in addition to doing a worst movies list. I think it works better doing the worst list first and then doing the best list. I ran a poll asking people what they wanted to see first, and they wanted to see the best movies list first, but then I thought, it just worked better doing the worst first, you know? And that rhymed, I'm aware. Now, before I go over the worst movies proper, the top 10 worst movies, I'm gonna go over some dishonorable mentions. Plankton, the movie, Captain America, Brave New World, Materialists, Honey Don't, Him, and Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And now, before you get your panties in a twist over FNAF 2, let me clarify something. I had a lot of fun with this movie. I found this movie to be enjoyable and entertaining. However, from an unironic, objective perspective, it does deserve to be acknowledged as one of the worst movies of the year, from an objective perspective. I had a lot of fun with this movie. It was a fun, bad movie, but it was also a bad movie, objectively. You can have fun with a movie, you can enjoy a movie, and then also acknowledge from an objective perspective, it's bad. I think the same thing could be said for the first movie that we'll talk about on the list proper, but to a far lesser extent. Now, finally, before I go over the worst movies of 2025, I just want to clarify something. If there's a movie that's missing from the list or from the dishonorable mentions, there's a very strong chance that I didn't watch it, and that's why it's not on the list. There's a very strong chance that's the reason why. I believe at the beginning of the year, Netflix put out this movie called The Electric State, which is, I believe, from the Russo brothers, the directors of Infinity War and Endgame, and this movie had, like, a massive budget, like an unnecessarily high budget, and it's also, like, a really terrible movie, apparently. It's, like, a really awful movie. It's based on, like, a comic book, I think. I'm not sure. I've heard that this movie is awful. However, for better or worse, I never got around to seeing it, and so it's not on the list, period. And so, with all of that said, enough delays. It's time to go over the top 10 worst movies of 2025. Let us begin. Number 10 is a movie that I want to imagine there will be some people that will somehow be unironically pissed off at the fact that I'm including it on this list. And again, like I briefly brought up with FNAF 2, I will acknowledge that this movie is at least entertainingly bad. I personally had fun with this movie. but it is objectively a bad movie. And unlike with FNAF 2, I feel like it's worse for this movie because I could very easily see an alternate, actually unironically good version of this movie. And it hurts me the fact that we will never get that unironically good version. Number 10 is a Minecraft movie. Yes, that's right, the most memed movie of 2025, and it's also the 10th worst movie of the year. Now, Minecraft is a game that a lot of people hold very close to their hearts, myself included. And when you take into consideration the recent video game adaptation renaissance that we've been living in, you would think a movie based on Minecraft, a movie based on the best-selling video game of all time, would be part of that club. You would think it would be part of that renaissance. And then near the end of 2024, the first teaser trailer for this movie would come out, and almost instantly everyone would ridicule it, including me. The weird, ugly designs of like some of the characters, like they try to recreate the blocky art style of Minecraft, but they also make it like super photorealistic, and it just looked really unappealing and ugly to look at. The baffling decision to have Jack Black of all people play Steve, and it's more or less just Jack Black being Jack Black. There's nothing to make him Steve besides the fact that, oh yeah, he wears a blue shirt, or I guess a sweater or whatever, a vest for Jack Black's case. He wears a blue shirt. That means he's Steve. I understand Steve doesn't really have much of a character, much of a personality, but even then it just seemed like, yeah, this was Jack Black playing Jack Black, that's it. And the very predictable, generic story that one could already tell just from watching the trailer alone, of these four characters from the real world entering the Minecraft world, and they have to try and find a way out. It's like a very unoriginal, predictable, been there, done that story. A lot of people thought that this movie would be awful, it would bomb at the box office, and that's it. And then in the months leading up to the movie's release, this movie would have a kind of a 180 in terms of its reception, where it's like, instead of being looked at as like an awful, terrible movie, it would be looked at as a bad movie, but like a potentially ironically enjoyable bad movie. The more trailers that we would get for the movie, the closer that we got to the movie's release, the more memes we would get for the movie. The memes of like Jack Black saying different Minecraft related things. I don't know what's up with that. I guess there's just something inherently funny hearing Jack Black say Flint and Steel or the Nether. And then when the movie came out, it escalated into this big viral trend where people would throw food all over the theaters whenever Jack Black says something funny from Minecraft. The biggest example of this being Chicken Jockey. Unfortunately though, certain people would take it a bit too far, thereby ruining the challenge, the trend, whatever. This was a movie that people thought would fail, and instead it ended up being massively successful, one of the highest grossing movies of the year, and it came very close to making $1 billion. It's like Morbius, except the memes actually helped make it successful. Now again, I have to clarify, this movie is at least entertainingly bad. I had fun with this movie. Out of every movie on this list, this is probably the only one that I would ever come back to. This movie has far more rewatch value than the remaining 9 movies on the list. The remaining 9 movies, you could not pay me to sit through them a second time. This movie, yeah, you know, I could watch it. I could see like my friends and I watching it and having like a stupid time watching it, just a stupid fun time watching this dumb movie. I could see that. But then I think about it more deeply. I think about the whole thing of like, you know, Minecraft is a genuinely amazing game, and it's like, yeah, the movie's not unwatchable, but it doesn't feel like Minecraft. It's like it lacks a lot of what makes Minecraft great as a video game. I wholeheartedly believe they should have made this a fully animated movie, akin to like the Lego movie. They should have done something like the Lego movie. At the very least, what they could have done was have like, the real world segments be in live action, and then when all of the characters enter the Minecraft world, when like Jason Momoa enters the Minecraft world, then it's like, then everything becomes like CGI, blocky, whatever. I would take that. That would be fine by me. And instead, it's all just live action, and that's it. And I feel like that is a massive missed opportunity right there. This movie is also incredibly generic and predictable, and I understand this is like a stupid kids movie and whatever, but I don't know, it hurts me, the idea that like, Minecraft is an amazing game, and I feel like there should be more substance to this movie instead of just having it be like dumb brain rot slop, I think about like going with the Lego movie. Like the Lego movie has substance. It has like themes behind it. No one expected it to be a great movie, and yet it ended up being a great movie. No one expected it to be thought-provoking, and it ended up being thought-provoking. And then, I look at like Barbie as well, and it's like, I may hate Barbie. I think Barbie, I can't stand Barbie, but at least like I respect it for saying something. It's not just some soulless, dull movie, it actually like, I would never expect a Barbie movie to be thought-provoking, but it is, and even if I don't like the movie, I can at least respect it for that. It's like Lego and Barbie are able to do it, why can't Minecraft do it? It feels like a massive missed opportunity right there. I feel like this movie works a lot better if you look at it as a parody of Minecraft, rather than like a genuine, unironic film adaptation of Minecraft. If you look at this movie as something made to spoof Minecraft, then it works automatically. Then it becomes a 10 out of 10. But then like, you look at this as an unironic film adaptation of Minecraft, and it just falls flat. A lot of what makes Minecraft great is completely missing from this movie. And I don't want to come off as like a boring, pretentious nerd who hates fun and whatever. I don't want it to be like, oh, the people like Chicken Jockey and they find it funny and they're not allowed to. Don't find it funny. Flint and Steel is not funny, guys. I don't want to be like that. But then it's like, I think of like the memes from this movie. I think of the whole thing of like, they say unalive at one point. There's a character in the movie that's actually named General Chungus. There's a fucking big Chungus reference in the Minecraft movie released in 2025. And not only that, but there's a scene in the movie where he says unalive. It's like, I find that funny. I can laugh at that because it's stupid and ridiculous. And then I start thinking more about like this alternate Lego movie-esque Minecraft movie, this fully animated Minecraft movie that it doesn't have any real world crap in it. It fully captures the spirit of Minecraft, the essence of Minecraft. I think about like that movie. And especially given the fact that like the last couple of years we've had like more stylistic animated movies, Spider-Verse, K-pop Demon Hunters, TMNT Mutant Mayhem, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Wild Robot, etc. The list goes on. Like, you think of like all of those movies, and then you think of like Minecraft would fit in perfectly with those movies. And then like I think of all of that, and I get reminded that movie doesn't exist, and it never will exist. We will never get that movie, no matter what. And instead, we're stuck with what is essentially a fucking parody of Minecraft. A spoof is what it is. This is to Minecraft what Batman and Robin is to Batman. If you look at it as a parody, it's a masterpiece. If you look at it as a genuine, unironic movie, then it starts to fall flat. It's just a shame, if you ask me, really. There are unironically good things about the movie. I do believe that like Jack Black and Jason Momoa have a lot of great chemistry, but then it's like, it doesn't matter when the movie is just like, it doesn't feel like Minecraft. I know there's gonna be people that will get mad at me for putting this as one of the worst movies of the year, but I'm sorry. This movie is like funny and hilarious and whatever. It's ironically good. This movie is funny bad. But I don't want a Minecraft movie that's funny bad. I want a Minecraft movie that's genuinely unironically great. You know, I want a Minecraft movie that reminds me of why I love Minecraft. And this movie fails at doing that. I'm grateful that the movie isn't unwatchable or offensively bad or anything like that. I'm grateful that I could at least still have some form of enjoyment watching the movie, even if it's completely ironic. But I just can't help but feel that, like, we should have gotten an unironically great Minecraft movie instead of whatever the this is, you know? Needless to say, I'm not exactly looking forward to the sequel coming out in 2027, especially given the fact that I can guarantee you, instead of trying to be an unironically good movie, instead of trying to be a better movie than the first movie, they're gonna double down on the memes. They're gonna try their absolute hardest to have lightning strike twice. They're gonna try to recreate the magic, the success of Flint and Steel. They're gonna try and have Chicken Jockey Part 2 happen, and it's just gonna be an embarrassing failure. They are more or less self-aware of the memes, and yeah, everyone knows as soon as they become self-aware about the memes stop being funny. And so just like that, I'm not looking forward to the sequel. When the trailer for this thing first came out, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely gonna be one of the worst movies of 2025. And then the movie actually comes out, I watch it, and I think, yeah, it's a hilariously bad movie, it's entertaining, it's not one of the worst movies of 2025. And then I start thinking more deeply about the kind of movie that we should have gotten, the Minecraft movie that we should have gotten instead. And it makes me think, yeah, no, this actually is one of the worst movies of the year, never mind. Again, I understand there are going to be people that will be pissed off at this inclusion. There are going to be people that are like, oh, why is Minecraft on the worst movies list? How dare you? Which is exactly why we are moving on to a considerably less controversial take. Number 9 is probably the worst instance of false advertising I think I have ever seen for any movie ever. Number 9 is A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey. And let me tell you something right off the bat. This movie is neither big, nor bold, nor beautiful. This movie is fucking boring. Now, I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with the whole thing of, like, lately there's been a lot of, like, ironic, meta, snarky humor in movies. Like, you think of, I don't know, Deadpool, for example. You think of, like, the kind of humor that Deadpool has, and it's, like, very snarky, ironic, self-aware. It's, like, almost nothing is ever really taken seriously. You've seen, like, that sort of thing. You've seen people that are critical towards this style of humor. They want movies that feel sincere. They want movies that feel human again. And you know, I get that. I understand that. And then this movie, I think, is proof that, like, a movie being overtly earnest, overtly sincere can be just as bad as, like, an overtly snarky, sarcastic, ironic movie. The whole time I'm watching this movie, it just has this very, like, schmaltzy feel to it. It has this, like, very, like, lame, cheesy feel. And I understand people are gonna be like, bro, what were you expecting from a fantasy rom-com, you know? What was I expecting? And yeah, okay, good point right there. I wasn't expecting big, epic action scenes or anything like that. I wasn't expecting, like, you know, amazing, life-changing stuff like that. But even then, even for rom-com standards, I found this movie to be exceptionally lame and honestly just kind of boring as well. It tries to be all whimsical and fantastical, and it feels like it gets to the point where it feels like self-parody more than anything else. Out of every movie on this list, this is probably the one movie that's like, I could see this being a good movie the most. This is the one that I think comes the closest to being a good movie. I'm gonna be excluding Minecraft because in order for Minecraft to be an unironically good movie, there would have to be a lot of changes, and I mean a lot of changes. You would have to more or less create a completely different fucking movie in order to have a Minecraft movie be unironically good. Whereas this movie, I think, has moments where, yeah, this could be a good movie. And yet, the whole time I'm watching it, I was just bored out of my mind watching it. It has this like very schmaltzy feel to it, where it's like overtly sweet and whimsical, and it feels like a parody of itself. This feels like a movie that would have come out in like the 90s or something. There's nothing about this movie that screams at 2025. This feels like I'm watching a bad 90s movie. It feels like I'm watching a bad Disney movie. More specifically, a bad old Disney movie, not a bad modern Disney movie. There's a difference between the two. This difference will become very obvious with some of the later movies on this list. I don't even hate this movie necessarily, again, 2025 I thought was not as bad of a year for movies as 2024, in the sense that like there weren't as many like really awful movies. It's like, yeah, this movie is number 9, this movie is in the bottom 10, and yet at worst, I'd say maybe this movie is like a 4 out of 10 and that's it. It just strikes me as a very flat, very weak movie with nothing really interesting going for it. It is a journey, I suppose. It is a journey. There is a journey in the movie, so the title is not 100% false advertising. But I'm not sure if I want to call it a big, bold, or beautiful journey, let alone a mixture of all three combined. Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell try their absolute hardest to save this movie, and it's like, yeah, the acting is great for both of them, but unfortunately the chemistry is barely felt between the two. At no point watching this movie did I ever think, oh yeah, I want to see them get together, give me that classic old-fashioned Hollywood ending where they kiss. Let me see that, man. At no point did it ever feel like that to me. And the entire movie just radiated this very cheesy, schmaltzy feel. Like, even for rom-com standards, there's something exceptionally lame about this movie. Again, it feels like a bad 90s movie. There's nothing about this movie that screams 2025. It feels like a parody of itself. And how could I possibly forget the incredibly baffling, out-of-place Burger King product placement that this movie has. This movie tries its absolute hardest to be magical and whimsical and fantastical, and then it hits you with the Burger King product placement, and it's like, it just juxtaposes itself against the magical feel that the movie is supposed to have. This movie is what I like to call a Theater 9 movie. Now, some of you might be asking, what the hell is a Theater 9 movie? Well, I have a local movie theater that I go to, an AMC, and it has 9 auditoriums in it, and the 9th and final auditorium is like all the way in the back of the theater, and it's like, most of the time, it's like, sometimes they play like movies that are like late into the run, they'll play it there, movies that are like, they're still playing in theaters, but now they're starting to lose their steam, they'll just play it in Theater 9 for people who still want to go out and see it. And then like, when a new movie comes out and it's like, it's very obvious that no one gives a shit about this new movie, they just put it out in Theater 9. They just put it out in Theater 9. Like back in 2024, for example, I watched Harold and the Purple Crayon in theaters, and it's like, that was a Theater 9 movie. I'm pretty sure that was the movie that sparked the idea of a Theater 9 movie. This right here is a in Theater 9 movie. This is like a who cares movie. I'm honestly not surprised that this movie ended up bombing. It wasn't a very good movie. I don't want to hate this movie. I think this movie has a lot of potential to be good, but like, it as it stands, it just feels very flat and weak. It's like it's too schmaltzy. It's too like cheesy for my taste. It feels like a bad 90s movie more than a bad 2025 movie. There's nothing about this that screams at 2025. It feels like it's trying way too hard to be whimsical and magical to the point where I get secondhand embarrassment watching it. It feels like I'm watching a self-parody. Maybe it's because of my irony-laced brain. Maybe I've gotten used to like irony taking over. Maybe it's because I've become super f***ing cynical in 2025 going into 2026. But it's like I look at the overly schmaltzy feel of this movie and I can't help but just roll my eyes at it, like acknowledging how incredibly lame it is. I want this to be a good movie. There are rare moments where it's like, yeah, I could see this being a good movie, but for the most part, I found this to be a very boring, very schmaltzy movie. And even for rom-com standards, it just strikes me as being extremely lame. And also as well, I have to go into some behind-the-scenes stuff for this specific movie. So I had to sail the 7 seas for every movie on this list, not to watch them, but to like get them for this video, to apply, to get like screenshots and images and whatever for these movies to put them into the video. I was able to do this very easily for all of the movies that are on the best movies list, with the exception of 2 movies, but that's only because they're still playing in theaters. They came out very late into the year, and I was able to successfully do this for every movie on the worst movies list, except for this movie, except for A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey. I traveled to the island that I went to previously to get all of these movies, and it would just not work at all. You know how these islands are, they're filled to the brim with f***ing pop-ups and redirects and whatever. I tried to install like a redirect blocker and the piece of crap wouldn't work at all. I tried to look for alternatives, other islands to go to, and like none of them worked at all. And so against my will, I had to buy the movie on Blu-ray alongside a Blu-ray DVD ROM for my computer in order to rip the movie, thereby allowing for me to include like images and whatever from this movie in this video. And then, as if that wasn't good enough already, I eventually found an island that allowed me to download the movie and include it onto this video without needing the disc drive. So in other words, I wasted my money. I mean, listen, I'm gonna keep the disc drive just in case as a backup. You never know. I'm gonna keep it as a backup. But now it's like, now I'm stuck with this f***ing thing permanently. Now I'm stuck with this movie in my hands. I didn't have any intentions whatsoever to permanently own a really boring, really schmaltzy fantasy rom-com, but I guess I have this in my possession now against my will. Everything movies should be. Yeah, I don't know about that one, Jonathan. I don't know about that one. And so I kind of hate this movie a tiny bit because of that, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't think a mediocre rom-com would piss me off this badly, and yet here we are. And there you have it, folks. A bad, bland, boring journey. The 9th worst movie of 2025. Let's move on to number 8, shall we? Number 8 is a movie that's part of a franchise that, much like the creatures it focuses on, should have gone extinct a very, very long time ago. Number 8 is Jurassic World Rebirth. Alright, so I have to confess something. I had never seen a single Jurassic Park movie before 2025. In the days leading up to this movie's release, I binge-watched all of the previous 6 Jurassic Park movies. It was my first time ever watching any of these movies. I had heard a lot of things about like, oh, the first Jurassic Park is the only great installment. All the other ones are like whatever. Some of them are like really bad, that sort of thing. And it's like, I went into these movies with that knowledge, and then by the time I finished all 6 of these movies, I was left dumbfounded at the fact that like the first movie is so much better than all of the subsequent movies. It's not even funny. Like, y'all were not lying. The first movie needs no introduction at all. It's a classic. It's considered one of the greatest movies ever made. There is literally nothing I could say about this movie that hasn't already been said by tons of other people beforehand, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. I agree that this is the only masterpiece installment of the franchise. However, I don't think it's the only good movie in the franchise. I think The Lost World Jurassic Park, I don't know why they titled it that way. I don't know why it's not Jurassic Park The Lost World. I don't know why they put the subtitle first. That's weird. It's like saying The Empire Strikes Back Star Wars or Judgment Day Terminator 2. You know, it feels weird saying it. But getting back on topic, I think The Lost World Jurassic Park and the first Jurassic World are, for what they're worth, pretty good movies. They obviously don't hold a candle to the original, but I don't think they're bad movies either. The first Jurassic World in particular I find to be pretty decent. I'd say it's the second best movie in the franchise. Jurassic Park 3 I thought was incredibly mediocre. It's not a terrible movie, I don't hate it necessarily, but it also doesn't really do anything new or fresh. It doesn't have anything really remarkable about it. I feel like I started suffering franchise fatigue by the time I got to this movie, and yeah, considering the fact that I was still early on into this franchise binging it, that wasn't a good sign. It wasn't a good sign, the fact that I had acquired franchise fatigue that early on into my binge watching. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, I think, starts off strong. I think like the first quarter of the movie where they're on this island trying to rescue all of the dinosaurs before this volcano erupts, I think it's actually pretty good. And then the rest of the movie, where you have like these rich people auctioning off dinosaurs and whatever, and it's like the main characters, Chris Pratt and whatever, they try and stop them, and that's when it gets to like what the is this? That's when it becomes like really stupid and ridiculous. And I know that it's like, you know, these movies are kind of inherently stupid, all right? This is a movie about a dinosaur theme park with real dinosaurs, you know? This was inherently stupid from the beginning, and yet it's like, this feels like a parody more than like an actual legitimate sequel. And that feeling was further felt when I got to Jurassic World Dominion, which might, honest to God, be one of the worst movies I think I've ever seen. I cannot believe, like, this is a jump the shark movie right here. I ended up watching the extended version because I thought, oh, maybe that's like the definitive version to watch, and so I had to sit through like 2 hours and 40 minutes of the stupidest that I think I've ever seen in my life. And again, this is a movie franchise about a dinosaur theme park with real dinosaurs, so that's saying something right there. And then we cut to Rebirth. We get to Rebirth, and yeah, Rebirth is whatever. Again, it's very flat and unremarkable. I've seen a lot of people compare this movie to Jurassic Park 3, and I think, yeah, the two movies are very similar. Rebirth over here is supposed to be the third fresh start in this franchise after the first Jurassic Park and the first Jurassic World. And unlike the first Jurassic Park, which, I mean, come on, it was the start of it all. It was where everything began. And unlike the first Jurassic World, where it actually felt like they expanded upon everything, it felt like it had new things to say, this movie doesn't do anything new or remarkable. I watched this movie, and it just reeks of, yeah, we're running out of ideas, we're running out of new things to do. I think the best thing that I can say about this movie is that it's better than Dominion. It is a masterpiece when compared to Dominion. Dominion is such an awful fucking movie, and this is like so much better in comparison, even if it's still not a very good movie. This movie is a soulless cash grab and all that, but to be honest, I'm kind of glad that it exists because I cannot imagine having Dominion be the last movie in the franchise. Jesus Christ, man. This movie introduces a new set of characters that weren't seen in any of the previous 6 movies. There's nothing interesting about them. There's nothing memorable about them. One could argue no one goes into these movies expecting deep, complex characters. They just want to see big dinosaurs and that's it. But even then, I feel like these characters are just extra unmemorable and flat. There's nothing really like unique about them. There's nothing special about them. There's a scene in the movie where they take the time to acknowledge, the dinosaurs around them, and these are like the peaceful dinosaurs that they're not going to chase them or hurt them or anything like that. And it's like, this was like an amazing thing to watch the first time around back in 1993, but then it's like the 7th time in 2025, it doesn't feel very fresh anymore. It feels kind of stale to do, and it just further emphasizes the we're running out of ideas for this franchise vibe that I get from this movie. So like all of the main characters, like Scarlett Johansson and whatever, they're supposed to be like scientists. They travel to this island with the dinosaurs to find this like cure for cancer or whatever the does anyone actually care, honestly? Does anyone actually care if I get the storyline wrong for Jurassic Park 7? Be real with me, man. And along the way, they come across this family as well that, like, they're on vacation and they end up getting stranded on this island. They end up meeting up with the scientists, and these characters also, again, don't really do anything interesting. There's almost no reason to really care about them. I believe it was like there were 4 characters in this family. It's like there was a father, there was a little boy, there was a teenage daughter and her boyfriend, and that's it. And it's like none of them die, none of them get like hurt by the dinosaurs. It's like all 4 of them survive by the end of the movie. There are several moments throughout the movie where it makes you think the father is gonna die or the boyfriend is gonna die, and then it's like it ends up not happening at all. All 4 of them manage to escape safely, and I don't know, I just feel like that kind of makes this movie feel even more underwhelming and anticlimactic. It almost makes me question what's the point of even including this family into the movie if you're not going to have like any of the members of it die. And then likewise as well, the main scientist team of the movie, I believe it's like 1 member dies fairly early on into the movie, and that's it. In like the big climactic ending scene, I remember it was like one of the main characters tries to sacrifice himself. He like goes into the water holding up a flare to like get the attention of a dinosaur, leading the dinosaur away from the other characters, and it makes you think like he's gonna sacrifice himself to save the other members, to save the other characters of the movie. And the movie treats it like it's this big emotional thing, like the characters are mourning his loss, and then it turns out nope, he's perfectly fine. He's somehow managed to find a way to escape, and so now he's alive. And again, it just makes it feel very underwhelming and anticlimactic. Like, why even bother creating this like big epic thing where it's like, oh, he's gonna sacrifice himself, except he actually doesn't. He manages to distract the dinosaur and he manages to get away with it alive. He manages to reunite with the other characters and they all escape. It just feels very underwhelming and anticlimactic, and again, maybe I might be expecting too much out of Jurassic Park 7, but it just made the movie feel even more unnecessary than it already is. Again, this movie is unnecessary, it's a cash grab and all that. There's no reason for this movie to exist, but again, I'm kind of glad that it exists because, again, Dominion is such an awful movie. This is a masterpiece when compared to Dominion. It's kind of a boring, flat movie. It gives off heavy, we're running out of ideas vibes, but it's like, I'm glad that it exists because I cannot imagine having a movie as bad as Dominion be the last movie in the franchise. I already know there's going to be more of these movies in the future, even with the very lackluster quality of a lot of these movies. movies, including this one right here. And so I don't doubt the very real possibility that any of the future post-Rebirth movies could be worse than Dominion. But for the time being, I'm just going to appreciate the fact that, you know what, this movie is at least better than Dominion, and by a long shot as well. It's still a bad, unremarkable movie, but at least it's better than Dominion. It further ruins the kind of special feel that the first movie had, which I understand these movies make a lot of money, and that's why they keep making them, but it's like, the more of these movies that we get, the more Jurassic Park movies that we get, the less special the first one feels. But you know what? I'm glad that this franchise doesn't end with a movie as abysmal as Dominion. Anyways, let's move on to number 7, shall we? Number 7 is a movie that has a very absurd, unhinged premise, and although I did have fun watching it from time to time, I felt like it wasn't a fun enough movie. It missed out on the potential that it has. It didn't live up to the potential that it had. Number 7 is Death of a Unicorn. Now, I didn't exactly go into this movie expecting a life-changing masterpiece, a work of art, or anything like that. I knew what I was getting into going into this movie. This movie is supposed to be an absurd, fun comedy, and although, yeah, I did have fun watching it from time to time, it also didn't really feel as fun as I would have wanted it to be. There was just this vibe that I got from this movie, this kind of like weak, flat vibe that I got, where it was like, I wasn't enjoying this movie as much as I should. Like, did I have fun with this movie? Yeah, of course. Did I laugh while watching this movie? Yeah, of course. But it's not like I would ever come back to this movie again or anything like that. It doesn't give me anything to like, it doesn't live up to its premise. It doesn't live up to like the very unhinged nature of the movie's premise. This movie reminds me a little bit of a fellow A24 comedy Y2K in that in terms of premises, they're great movies. These two movies, I think they have a lot of potential to be fun movies. And unfortunately, I think both of these movies fall flat. I brought up Y2K as a dishonorable mention for the worst movies of 2024, and I feel like Death of a Unicorn isn't as much wasted potential as Y2K. Thinking about it more, I genuinely hate the fact that Y2K is not a much better movie because I genuinely love the premise behind it. And then I watched the movie and it was like, I didn't enjoy it all that much. I didn't find it all that funny or entertaining. And then Death of a Unicorn, I feel like has a similar problem where, I mean, it's not to a lesser extent, of course. You know, I laughed watching this movie. This movie is funny from time to time, but it's not as consistently funny. The whole movie just has this been there, done that vibe. This is yet another movie that doesn't feel like it came out in 2025. This feels like a movie that would come out in like the early to mid 2010s, around the time when comedies were starting to decline in popularity. You have the two main characters, a father and daughter, played by Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega respectively. They're spending several days at this rich family's house. I believe it's like Paul Rudd's character works for this family, I don't know. And then they run over a unicorn, and there you go, the title of the movie. They cause the death of a unicorn to happen. There you go, title drop. They arrive at the rich family's house and they have like the unicorn's corpse inside of their car, and they don't want the rich family to find out about it, and they end up finding out about it. And so they start conducting all of these like experiments on the unicorn's corpse and whatever. And then we have like other unicorns, like the parents of the deceased unicorn coming in. And it's like, I guess in addition to being a comedy, this movie also wants to be be a horror movie as well. You have Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega and the rich family getting locked inside of this house trying to find a way to escape and stop the unicorns. And then the unicorns end up murdering all of the people in the rich family for revenge. However, they let Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega live. Jenna Ortega for most of the movie is like the only character that believes in the unicorns and whatever. It's like a very cliche thing where it's like she tries to convince her father that like unicorns are real, or I don't remember what it was, to be honest, and then like Paul Rudd doesn't believe her at all. It's very cliche stuff that we have seen before in millions of other movies. I did laugh watching this movie from time to time. This is yet another movie that I feel like it's not terrible, but it's also not very good either. Midway into the movie, I just started thinking to myself, damn, you know what? I'm actually not enjoying this movie as much as I wanted to, honestly. I thought this movie would be better. I thought it would be like, it would live up to its really absurd premise, its really absurd title. For a movie called Death of a Unicorn, it's not really as unhinged as I would like it to be. Everything about this movie just feels very cliche and unoriginal. There's nothing to make it feel fresh or new. At no point while watching this did it ever feel like I was watching a movie from 2025. Damn, they really did put out the funniest comedy of 2013 in 2025, didn't they? The whole movie just felt very flat and weak. I was honestly kind of bored watching this movie from time to time. I don't hate this movie. Again, I understand that like people might be disappointed at the fact that like I'm not super harsh or negative towards any of these movies so far. But again, 2025, not as bad of a year for movies as 2024. I promise y'all we're gonna get to the stinkers eventually, okay? We're gonna get to the really bad garbage soon. But overall, Death of a Unicorn is a movie that's just, it can be fun from time to time. It has a great premise. It's a very like absurd, unhinged premise, but it doesn't live up to that absurd, unhinged nature. It's not as absurd or unhinged as I would like it to be. And the movie just has a very unoriginal, been there, done that feel. Like there's nothing about this that screams 2025. It just feels very cliche and derivative of older movies. Again, I understand this movie might not be top 10 worst movies of 2025 material, but again, 2025 was surprisingly light when it came to really bad movies, and it just so happened that this movie was one of the weaker ones that I would watch in 2025. I don't hate it, it's not a terrible movie, occasionally it's funny, occasionally it lives up to the very absurd nature of its premise, but generally I found this movie to be kind of boring and dull and not as fun as I would want it to be. Not a movie that I would ever come back to again a second time. Anyways, let's move on to number 6, and I have great news for y'all. Number 6 is when we start getting into the pretty bad stuff. Number 6 is a movie that, believe it or not, I was really hoping wouldn't be all that bad. I was surprisingly optimistic and hopeful that this movie could actually be pretty good, or at least not as bad as some of the movies similar to it that would come beforehand, especially a certain other movie that came out a few months beforehand that will be talked about later on this list. And unfortunately, this movie disappointed me. It didn't end up being the surprisingly good, not as bad as I expected movie that I wanted it to be. Number 6 is the Lilo and Stitch live-action remake. Now, I want to clarify something very important before I go over the movie. I have seen the original animated Lilo and Stitch, of course. I have seen it, but I haven't watched it in a very long time, alright? It was a very long time ago when I watched this thing. I didn't bother rewatching this movie when the live-action remake was coming out back in May, and I didn't bother rewatching it for this video. I didn't bother rewatching it or the live-action movie so I could, like, talk about it in this video. And, yeah, that ended up being a massive mistake looking back on it. But in all fairness, I did have this strange gut feeling in me telling me that the live-action Lilo and Stitch remake wouldn't be all that bad. I'm sure if I rewatched the original animated movie and then I go back to the live-action remake, I would probably hate the live-action remake a lot more, and I would very likely place it much lower down on the list than at number 6. However, it's been a long time since I've seen the original animated Lilo and Stitch, and so the live-action remake, I just think, yeah, number 6, that's a good place to put it. So this movie came out a few months after a certain other movie that will be talked about later on this list, and I thought this movie would be the complete polar opposite of that movie. I was strangely optimistic that this movie would actually be good, or at least not as bad as the other Disney live-action remakes, and I guess in a way, this is one of the better live-action Disney remakes, but it's not the surprisingly good movie that I expected it to be. Lilo and Stitch is a movie that needs absolutely no introduction. It is one of the most beloved Disney movies of all time. The character of Stitch is massively beloved by people of all ages. Stitch is arguably the most beloved Disney character outside of like the core original characters, Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, etc. A live-action remake of Lilo and Stitch was inevitable, whether you liked it or not, and I thought there was no way they could screw it up. I had that strange gut feeling in me. I don't know what it was. I guess it was like the trailers didn't make the movie look all that bad. I guess, it looked like a fairly decent movie from the trailers, actually. And then I ended up watching the movie itself, and I thought it was like okay, I suppose. I didn't hate it necessarily. It wasn't the surprisingly good movie that I wanted it to be, but it also wasn't a bad movie either. It wasn't an awful movie. And once again, keep in mind, I hadn't seen the original animated movie in a very long time. And then after the movie came out, there would be a lot of backlash towards it, the typical live-action remake bad stuff, but also the fact that this movie would change certain things from the original animated movie. Now, once again, I thought this movie would be the complete polar opposite of this other movie that will be talked about later on this list. I probably shouldn't be all vague and cryptic about it. I shouldn't be teasing it because I guarantee you everyone watching this knows exactly what movie I'm talking about, and yet I still feel like being vague and cryptic. I don't know why. But this other movie was widely controversial, easily one of the most controversial movies to come out in recent times, and I looked at this Lilo and Stitch remake and I thought, okay, this was going to be the complete polar opposite of that movie. This thing was going to be a lot more successful critically and commercially, and I mean, like, yeah, at the end of the day, Disney ended up winning with this movie. This movie made $1 billion. It was one of the highest grossing movies of 2025, and it's getting a sequel. They ended up winning. Disney ended up winning with this movie. But that doesn't change the fact that there were people that did really hate this movie because it would change certain things from the original animated movie. And I didn't feel that way when I was actually watching it because, again, it had been a long time since I saw the original movie. I didn't feel like rewatching the original animated movie before this movie. I guess I was busy binge watching Mission Impossible for The Final Reckoning, and that's why I didn't have time to rewatch the original animated Lilo and Stitch. I did not sit through 7 movies just to prioritize the live-action Lilo and Stitch remake over the final Mission Impossible movie. Now, there is one thing that I will say about this movie that's good, and that is Stitch himself. I think they did an amazing job at bringing this character into live action, or I guess like photorealistic CGI is a more accurate term. They did a great job with this. Stitch still looks just as adorable as he did in the original animated movie. When you look at the live-action Disney remakes and their obsession with taking these beloved animated characters and making them realistic, It's like, it's a miracle they didn't do that with Stitch. It's a miracle they still kept that cartooniness in Stitch. And they did it in a way so it's like, it doesn't feel uncanny or anything like that. It genuinely looks really good. Stitch looks great in this movie. The other alien characters, namely Jumba and Pleakley, were unfortunately not as lucky. One pretty big change that this movie made from the original that a lot of people criticize it for was the fact that in the original animated movie, they would dress up as humans, but it would be like very poorly done disguises where it's like, it's obviously them, but everyone thinks they're just normal people. And then in the live action remakes, it's like they just transform into like normal human beings and that's it. And a lot of people were especially mad at the fact that, like, in the original animated movie, Pleakley would dress up as a girl. And I guess people would look at this as being, like, unintentional trans representation, unintentional, like, drag queen representation, I don't know. And apparently the director of the movie tried to include this into the live-action remake, but he was unable to. And when you take into consideration, this is Disney that we're talking about, and, this was also 2025, it's the pretty big elephant in the room for 2025. When you take that into consideration, yeah, that this is not really surprising at all. And on the one hand, I understand being disappointed by that, but on the other hand, it's kind of a good thing that we don't have to see these fucking awful live action designs all that much in the movie. They genuinely cooked with Stitch, and then for Jumba and Pleakley, it's like, no, this looks terrible, I'm sorry. And speaking of Jumba, they end up changing his character completely from the original movie. Apparently the main villain from the original animated movie was completely removed from this live action remake, and I believe the reason why was because they couldn't find a way to make his design work with like the photorealistic CGI, which is insane if you ask me, because I could very easily see this character translating into the photorealistic CGI art style much better than Jumba or Pleakley. And so as a result of that, Jumba is the main villain of the movie. Now again, it had been forever since I watched the original animated movie, and so, I didn't really remember this character. I don't even remember his name, to be honest. That should tell you something right there. But I do remember the ending of the original animated movie had like a spaceship fight between like, there was like a yellow spaceship and a red spaceship, and it was like, I guess that's kind of in the live action remake, but instead of the villain from the original movie, it's Jumba. And while I was watching it, it was like midway into the scene, I was like, wait, isn't he supposed to be a good guy? What the is going on? The movie ends with him getting arrested, and then there's like a post-credit scene where you have Pleakley with the rest of the main characters, the human characters, and I was just like, wait, isn't the other guy a good guy as well? Why isn't he there? What happened? And then as it turns out, they changed it so that he's the villain instead, and I don't understand why the hell they did that. Again, I wasn't necessarily angry at this. I thought it was a really stupid thing to do, but I wasn't angry at it because, I didn't have many memories of the animated movie. It had been forever since I watched it. Briefly looking past the changes that this movie makes to the original before I go over the big controversial change that it makes from the original, I just felt like, I guess I did have fun watching the movie from time to time. I guess it was like occasionally it could be funny, but there was just this whole like vibe that I got from it that was like, this didn't work in live action. It didn't work as well as it did in animation. I know there's going to be people that will say like, oh, this applies to every single live action remake of an animated movie, but it's like, looking at this, the way I look at it, it's like, there are stories that can work in both animation and live action, and I'll go over this in more detail in the best movies of 2025 list with a particularly controversial inclusion, I want to imagine. And then it's like, on the other hand, there are stories that can only work in live action. Like, I don't think anyone's gonna say that, like, The Godfather would still be a great movie if it was animated. I don't think anyone's gonna say that at all. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I have a strong feeling Saving Private Ryan wouldn't be as good if it was animated. I don't know why. I just have that gut feeling. And then there are stories that can only work in animation and not in live action. And Lilo and Stitch is one of those those stories. There are scenes in the movie where Lilo and Stitch are having fun together, playing around, messing with other people, and it's like, it's funny and charming and cute in the original animated movie, and then in the live action remake, something about it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel the same. It's not like the actress that plays Lilo's fault or anything like that. It's not her fault. I'm not gonna blame a child for this or anything like that, but it just, something doesn't feel right about it. It doesn't feel the same. Something feels off about it. That was just generally the vibe that I got from the movie. You know, it's like, I know people like to go on about these live action remakes and how they're not good, but it's like, it didn't really feel, you know, again, there are some stories that can work in both live action and animation. And it's like, Lilo and Stitch is not one of those stories, unfortunately. And with that said, let's go over the very big, very controversial change that this movie makes from the original, the ending. Now, as we all know, the main message of Lilo and Stitch is Ohana means family, family means no one gets left behind. There's a subplot in the original animated movie where Lilo's older sister, Nani, has to try and like take care of her, or else she'll lose custody of her. And at first the two of them are unable to get along, and as the movie ends they start to love each other and respect each other. Ohana means family, that sort of thing. And then the live action remake just kind of abandons that by changing the ending so that Nani doesn't like lose custody of Lilo, but instead gives her to like, I don't remember, like the agent or whatever. I think his name was Cobra Bubbles or something. I don't remember what his whole thing was in either movie. She does this so that she can go to a marine biology college in California. Yes, California. Friendly reminder, this movie takes place in Hawaii. Now, I don't know about the rest of y'all. I've personally never been to Hawaii, but I have a very strong feeling Hawaii probably has the best marine biology courses in the world. You know, I wonder why I would possibly think that. I wonder what could possibly compel me to believe that the best marine biology courses would be in Hawaii. I wonder what would inspire me to believe that this whole thing of her leaving Lilo and going to California is incredibly stupid. If you're gonna change the ending of the movie, that's one thing, but at least have the change make sense. They try to make up for this by having this portal gun. I swear to y'all, it actually just is a straight up portal gun. I believe like Lilo has this portal gun that'll allow for her to like open up a portal to Nani's dorm, allowing for her to briefly visit Lilo. And it just strikes me as like a pretty stupid thing to do. Like, I don't know why the hell you would do that. And this ending was where a lot of the backlash for this movie came from. I was genuinely expecting this to be a controversy-free movie. Again, I expected this to be the polar opposite of this other movie that will be talked about later on this list, and then it ends up being controversial itself. Isn't that wonderful? Now, I'm going to admit something that I understand will make a lot of people angry, but I can assure you, I have my reasons to back it up. I understand 100% why people hate this ending. I understand why people are angry towards this ending. I am not defending this ending. I am not blindly ignoring the reasons why people are angry at this ending. I'm not just gonna blindly say like, oh, people hate this movie because it's a live-action Disney remake, and that's it. That's the only reason people don't like it, totally. While completely ignoring the elephant in the room reasons why people actually hate the damn movie. I'm not gonna do anything like that at all, but I am personally unable to get angry at this movie, and that's simply because I didn't exactly have a very good relationship with my family in 2025. I don't want to go into too much detail about this. Lord knows I don't want to like trauma dump in a worst movies of 2025 video, but I had a very rough relationship with my family in 2025, and so I looked at the backlash surrounding this movie for betraying the message of Ohana or whatever, and it was like, Yeah, I understood why people were mad at this, but I was unable to get mad at it myself, unfortunately. It's really hard for me to pull the old Dom Toretto when I had a very sour relationship with my family all throughout 2025. And unfortunately, I don't think things are going to improve in 2026. Anyways, Jesus, this segment has been going on for much longer than the other segments. I apologize for that. Alright, let's move on to the top 5, just like that, baby. Number 5 was the first movie that I watched in 2025. Now, as most of us know, January and February are generally regarded as weak months for movies. It's the end of the holiday blockbuster season. All of the big movies from the holiday season have already come out, and so going into the new year, there's always movies that are just kind of like, who really cares about them? More often than not, these movies end up being pretty bad, and they also end up being box office failures. And this movie right here, I think, is a perfect example of a January-February movie. Number 5 is Wolfman. Now, this is a horror movie, and generally, a horror movie is supposed to scare you. You're supposed to be scared watching a horror movie. And even if it isn't scary, it should at least still be entertaining in some way. Like, as I mentioned all the way at the beginning of this video, FNAF 2, fellow Blumhouse 2025 movie, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. A movie that is not very scary, and again, it is objectively bad, but it's also largely entertaining. Granted, this could come from the fact that it's attached to a known IP, but even then, this is a lot more of a fun movie than Wolfman. Wolfman is such a generic whatever movie. It's like, it doesn't do anything new or fresh. It's just your standard by-the-numbers horror movie. A family, a father, mother, and daughter all go out to this old cabin in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the forest. I believe it was like the father's childhood home growing up. And then there's like a spooky, scary creature in the forest. And the father actually remembers coming across this spooky, scary creature while he was hunting with his father as a child. The father ends up getting bitten by the monster, and just like that, he becomes the titular Wolfman. Now, this movie decides to do something a bit interesting, and I'm not sure if I want to list this as a redeeming quality or not necessarily. Maybe this is a good idea, but it was poorly executed, I'm not sure. But when you think of Wolfman, when you think of the Wolfman, when you think of like werewolves, you want to imagine, big, hairy creatures. And then for this movie, the father slowly turns into the titular Wolfman. And then by the time he has fully formed into the Wolfman, he doesn't have any hair at all. It's a Wolfman with no hair. Which, I mean, like, okay, that's an interesting thing to do. I criticize this movie for feeling very generic and unoriginal. It's just your standard derivative horror movie. And so I can't really criticize this movie for trying to do something different with the titular monster without coming off as a hypocrite. But it is undeniably a weird decision, and I might not be against it necessarily, but there is a part of me that feels it doesn't work as well as it should. Maybe this could be executed well, but I'm not sure. Again, this is very obviously a horror movie. I'm supposed to be scared watching this movie, and instead I wasn't scared at all. At no point watching this was I ever scared watching this. Every jump scare that would come up would just feel very obvious and predictable. It wasn't even like a fun, bad movie either. It's not even like, oh, it wasn't scary, but at least you could have fun with it because of how bad it was. No, this movie was just, it was incredibly boring to sit through. It was like, I didn't really care all that much about what was going on. It wasn't scary. It wasn't like entertaining or anything like that. It was just a really dull and uninteresting movie. Shortly before I watched this movie, I saw Nosferatu from Robert Eggers. I gotta be real careful saying that last name. I saw this in theaters, and let me just tell y'all, let me just say, the difference in quality between these two movies is night and day. I know it might not be fair for me to compare the two movies because Nosferatu is like more like artsy, I guess. It's more like, I don't want to call it art house, but like it comes closer to being art house than Wolfman. And then Wolfman is more like straightforward, traditional, commercial. That's the right word to use. Wolfman is more commercial in comparison. I understand that this is more or less me comparing a 5-star gourmet restaurant to McDonald's, but even then, I couldn't help but notice the difference in quality between Nosferatu and Wolfman. Near the end of the movie, there's a plot twist that I guess it's not that bad. I think it has potential to be a good plot twist. Spoilers, obviously. I don't think anyone will care about this movie enough to complain about me spoiling it. But near the end of the movie, it turns out the other monster, the first Wolfman that caused the main father character to turn into the titular Wolfman, it's like apparently it was his father. I guess at some point, the father's father became a Wolfman himself. And I suppose it's not a bad plot twist. If this wasn't a better movie, I would be more positive towards it. I genuinely didn't expect it. When I watched it, I was like, holy crap, that caught me off guard. There are a few moments in the movie where you have the mother and the daughter of the family trying to be with their father, who had become the Wolfman. And it's like, it's obvious that there is still a little bit of humanity within the father in this new Wolfman state that he's in. And I guess a few of these moments could be kind of sweet, actually. I guess it's like, again, if this wasn't a better movie, I would be more positive towards this stuff. It did admittedly make me question, will this movie have a happy ending? I don't know why I would ever expect a horror movie to have a happy ending, but the few moments where they bond with their new form of their father, the Wolfman, whatever, the few scenes that there are of this, it did make me think that the movie could have a happy ending, that maybe, he can go back to normal. I mean, it's not really gonna mean much. The movie's still not gonna be very good if it had a happy ending or not. I don't remember how the movie ends. I think they murdered the Wolfman. I'm not sure. There's no sequel bait tease or anything like that. I want to imagine this will very likely be a one-off movie. This movie came out in January. It's very obvious that it came out in January. It very much feels like a January movie. It did really poorly at the box office, and it would be the first of several box office flops that Blumhouse would put out this year, before picking up near the end of the year thanks to Black Phone 2 and Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And honestly, I'm not exactly surprised that this movie did poorly. It was a ridiculously dull and uninteresting movie. I didn't find it scary at all. More than anything else, I was just bored watching this movie. It's not even a fun, bad movie or anything like that. It's not even entertaining. It's not even it's bad, but you could have fun with it. No, this movie is just ridiculously dull to sit through. It's boring. I brought up Nosferatu, and I just remembered now, the director of that movie, I said his name already, but I'm not going to take that risk and say it again. The director of Nosferatu, apparently he's working on a Wolfman movie himself, a werewolf movie, and it's supposed to come out at the end of this year. So it'll be very interesting to see how that will compare to this movie. Again, I understand I'm comparing a 5-star gourmet restaurant to McDonald's over here, but even then, it would be funny to look at the two, to compare and contrast the two, to see why this movie will hopefully work while Wolfman failed. I didn't even necessarily have any high hopes for this movie. I just went to go and see it because I don't know, I just wanted to go out for the night. I just wanted something to do. I just wanted to watch a stupid movie one night, and lo and behold, this ended up being the movie that I watched, and I found it to be a really boring movie. Around the latter half of 2025, I had to go on an incredibly long plane trip, and the couple in front of me, there was like this elderly couple in front of me that they would watch several movies, and like one of the movies they would watch was Wolfman. That specific flight was also the first time that I ever stepped into an airplane bathroom. I had heard so many horror stories about those, and stepping into one myself, I was surprised. Those places are f***ing small. Airport bathrooms are f***ing cramped. Holy crap. I tried my hardest to pee and I was just unable to. There was like something, like combined with the knowledge that I was all the way up in the air, it just made me feel real uneasy. I didn't pee at all until we landed and got to the airport. The 5 incredibly awkward minutes that I spent trying to pee inside of that airplane bathroom were scarier than the entirety of Wolfman. I can tell you that right there. That should tell you a lot about this movie. And so we will now move on to number 4. Number 4 is a movie that is admittedly low-hanging fruit. I feel like every year there should be at least one low-hanging fruit movie on this list. And even if it is low-hanging fruit, I think it still deserves to be on this list, period. Number 4 is Smurfs. Now, I don't think anyone was expecting a Smurfs movie in 2025 to be particularly very good. I don't know who was clamoring for a Smurfs movie in 2025, let alone expected a Smurfs movie in 2025 to be good. But indeed, we did get a Smurfs movie in 2025, and it was bad, and it was also a box office failure. This is yet another movie that doesn't feel like it's from 2025. I feel like this is a reoccurring thing all throughout this video, where a lot of these movies came out in 2025, and yet it's like none of them feel like they're from 2025. The movie has the same Smurfs go into the real world plot line that the live action movies from 2011 and 2013 have. And when the trailers for this first came out, there were a lot of people that were surprised by this. The idea of like, they already did this. They already had them go into the real world. Why are they doing that again? And it's not even like this is supposed to be Smurfs 3 or anything like that. No, this is like a completely different, like a reboot, I guess you could say, of the Smurfs movies. And so the whole thing of having them go into the real world again just reeked of creative bankruptcy right there. I guess to give the movie a tiny bit of credit, they don't have a human companion character or anything like that. Like there's no live action real life character that joins them, like how the movies from the early 2010s had Neil Patrick Harris in them. This movie doesn't have that, for better or worse. They don't have anything like that in it. But even then though, it just feels incredibly lazy to rehash this idea of what if the Smurfs but in the real world. In all fairness though, I'm not exactly sure how else you could be able to make a Smurfs movie. Did I watch the Smurfs when I was a kid? Maybe I did, I don't know. I think I watched like reruns of the original cartoon on Boomerang when I was a kid, I'm not sure. Do I still care about the Smurfs today? Hell no. The general vibe that I got from the Smurfs were they don't really have much in the way of a storyline. And so there's no way that a movie based on the Smurfs could work. The Smurfs don't really have much in the way of a storyline. Maybe they have enough of a storyline to work like a 5-10 minute long episode for a cartoon, but not a feature-length theatrical movie. And the whole movie just feels very generic and derivative. Again, I'm not surprised at all that the Smurfs animated movie from 2025 is generic slop. I wasn't expecting a masterpiece out of this movie. Again, I know this is low-hanging fruit, but it seems like audiences didn't even like this movie either, so I guess that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable in criticizing it. Rihanna is Smurfette. There you go. I said the line. I'm so glad the marketing made it very clear that Rihanna is Smurfette. And I mean, like, yeah, Rihanna has a lot of good music, music, don't get me wrong, but the voice does not fit at all. This voice does not fit this character. And then also in the mix, you have James Corden back to haunt us after a few years hiatus. I brought this up when I was reviewing the movie itself. I go into more detail about this in my review for the movie, but I'm surprised, like, when people talk about, like, overexposed movie actors and whatever, when people go on about, like, oh, The Rock is in every movie now, Jack Black is in every movie now, etc. I'm surprised, like, we just completely forgot about James Corden. Like, he just disappeared for a brief period of time. Unfortunately, even with that brief hiatus, no one was really happy to see him come back in this movie. And the movie just has a lot of very cliche, unoriginal elements in it. Again, I understand this is stupid slop for babies, low-hanging fruit, but it's almost comical how generic this movie is when it comes to its themes. This feels like a movie that would have come out in like 2008, not 2025. I would see a lot of people online comparing this to the DreamWorks Trolls franchise, and I've never seen any of these movies, nor do I ever intend to. Lord knows I have far better things to do in my life than watch any of these f***ing movies. And even then though, even if I have never seen these movies, I definitely got Trolls vibes from this movie. The main villain of this movie is, believe it or not Gargamel, but instead his brother. We have a f***ing Smurfs OC in this movie. And I guess he ends up kidnapping Papa Smurf, and so it's like, it's up to Smurfette and the others, James Corden Smurf, whatever, it's up to them to rescue Papa Smurf. It's just a very ridiculously generic storyline. Again, I was not expecting a Smurfs movie to have an amazing, compelling, complex story, much less a Smurfs movie in 2025. But even then, this is incredibly generic, ridiculously generic. Yeah, this is more or less what I expected a Smurfs movie in 2025 to look like. I understand this is low-hanging fruit, but I don't care. I'm still putting it on the list anyways. I can assure y'all the next 3 movies are not low-hanging fruit, don't worry. Number 3 is a movie that I know a lot of y'all have been waiting for me to talk about on this list. There's gonna be people that will be surprised that this isn't number 1, but I want to imagine more of y'all are just happy to see this movie is on the list, period. I mean, after all, how could anyone possibly make a worst movies of 2025 list and not include Snow White? That's just a guarantee. That's just an inevitability right there. Unless they never watched the movie, unless they skipped out on it, and so therefore they can't put it onto their list, in which case, yeah, fair enough, I suppose, fair enough. This is, without a doubt, the biggest disaster in recent film history. It's almost incredible how much of a train wreck this thing was. It's like, I hate the fact that Disney is Disney, because then that means we're never gonna get, like, a documentary or whatever about the making of this movie. Like, I think about, like, Apocalypse Now. In the early 90s, there was, like, a documentary that was made about the making of Apocalypse Now and how it was a complete disaster. I think it was called like Heart of Darkness or something like that. And it's like, I hate the fact that because Disney is Disney, we're never gonna get a Snow White equivalent to Heart of Darkness, man. I would pay good money to watch that, easily. Everything that could have gone wrong with this movie went wrong. Everything that shouldn't have happened with this movie happened, and that includes the very existence of this movie itself. I wholeheartedly think Disney should have just scrapped this movie. I literally cannot think of a single bad thing that would come out of them scrapping this movie. It would save them and almost everyone involved with this movie a lot of stress, a lot of backlash, a lot of controversy, and a lot of ridicule. Unfortunately, the actual movie itself is nowhere near as much of a gloriously entertaining train wreck to sit through as the behind-the-scenes controversies surrounding this movie. I don't even understand the idea of this movie. Like, looking past the controversies, even if this movie had 0 controversies, I still think it would have done poorly at the box office, just from a conceptual visual standpoint, I don't understand the idea of making this movie. You know, it's like you look at the other live action Disney remakes, you look at like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, and it's like these are not good movies. I'm not defending these movies at all, but I can also understand why they were successful. I can understand why they made $1 billion. It's because people have nostalgia for the original animated movies that they're based off of. There's a lot of nostalgia value to them. These are all remakes of the Disney Renaissance era movies from the 90s, and there are a lot of people that are nostalgic for these movies. There are a lot of people that love these movies when they were kids, and so they want to see like a live action new reimagining of their favorite childhood animated movie. And so it's like, even if these movies aren't very good, I can also understand why they made a lot of money. And then meanwhile, Snow White is a remake of a movie from the in 1930s. It's like, yeah, there are people that grew up with this movie. There are people that are nostalgic for this movie that grew up in like the 90s and 2000s and whatever. But it's like, how many of these people grew up with this when compared to like The Little Mermaid or Aladdin or whatever? Like, how many kids in the 90s watched Snow White when compared to The Lion King or Toy Story? How many kids in the 2000s grew up with Snow White when compared to like, I don't know, The Incredibles, Finding Nemo, like all of Pixar's movies from the 2000s, or like The Emperor's New Groove, Lilo and Stitch? I mean, hell, even including stuff from like Disney Channel, Hannah Montana, Phineas and Ferb, you name it. It's like, how many of them grew up with Snow White compared to all of those other things? This movie lacked the nostalgia advantage that a lot of the live action Disney remakes have, and that includes the Lilo and Stitch remake. That's why I knew the Lilo and Stitch remake would be a much more successful movie, because it has that nostalgia advantage. It has that nostalgia appeal. Lilo and Stitch is a movie that is beloved by millennials and Gen Z, and so a live action remake of it would be far more appealing to them than a live action remake of a movie from the 1930s, regardless of its actual quality. This movie lacked that nostalgia advantage. It's a remake of a movie from the 1930s. The only people that are nostalgic for the original Snow White are either in retirement homes or they're 6 feet underground. And so I do believe that this movie would have done poorly at the box office, even if the controversies weren't there, even if this was a controversy-free movie. And speaking of which, I thought Lilo and Stitch would do better on the basis of like, it would be the complete polar opposite of the Snow White remake, where it's like the Snow White remake has so many changes, so many differences from the original animated movie, and that was one of the big reasons why it was controversial. And then Lilo and Stitch, I thought, would just be a simple by the numbers live action remake. Tell the same story but in live action. Simple as that. No controversy whatsoever would come from that. And then, lo and behold, they ended up changing certain things from the original movie, and there ended up being backlash towards the movie for that. Obviously not to the same extent as the Snow White remake. Again, I must remind you all, this movie made $1 billion, and it's getting a sequel. At the end of the day, Disney ended up winning. We are the losers in this situation. I gotta remind you all of that. But even then, it was like, I really did think this would be the complete polar opposite of the Snow White remake, and it's like, yeah, it was, but it doesn't feel like much of an opposite. I thought it would be more of an opposite, if you get what I'm saying. Now, I think it's important for me to note, I have never seen the original animated Snow White. This isn't like with Lilo and Stitch, where it's like, I've seen it, but it was like a long time ago when I watched it. No, I've straight up never seen this movie. I know it's historically important. I know it was the first Disney movie and the first animated movie ever made. I get that, but I've never seen this movie. So I'm saying all of this as someone that has never seen this movie. I'm also going to clarify as well that I do not hate Rachel Zegler, the actress who plays Snow White in this movie. Thinking about it more, I think it's kind of stupid the fact that they casted her as Snow White, given the fact that, I mean, like, I'm sorry, I'm not racist. I swear to y'all I'm not racist. But it's like, her name is Snow White. Come on now. The whole thing with her is that, like, her skin is supposed to be as white as snow, as pale as snow. I don't remember how the saying goes. This isn't like with The Little Mermaid, where it's like, oh, in the 2023 movie, Ariel is black. And it's like, okay, I don't care about that, because Ariel's race has no relevance to the plot of The Little Mermaid. Ariel can be any race, and it wouldn't make any difference whatsoever. This isn't like that. With Snow White, it actually is kind of important to this character, the fact that she's white, because then otherwise, why would you name her Snow White? I get they changed the explanation. She was born during a snowstorm, and that's why she's named Snow White, but it's like, I don't know, I feel like it would just be easier to get a white actress instead. I don't hate Rachel Zegler. Again, I have better things to do with my life than hate on some actress because she doesn't like an old movie that I've never even seen before. But I am just simply acknowledging she was miscasted for this. And when it comes to like a lot of the things that she would say about the original animated movie, again, I've never seen it, but like looking at a lot of the things she would say about the original animated movie that people would criticize her for, it's like, you know, I maybe she's wrong on some of these things, but I feel like there are some things that she said that are like, you know, she kind of has a point. Maybe she could have delivered it better. Maybe she could have, you know, get rid of the snarky, weird stuff and, like, you know, have it be more straightforward and serious. But then it's like, I can kind of understand where she's coming from for some of this stuff. Like, I believe she said something along the lines of, like, the original Snow White came out in the 1930s and it shows. It has, like, outdated, poorly aged stuff. And, like, you know, I don't doubt that. I'm sure this movie has and poorly aged stuff in it. It came out in the 1930s. There was a lot of stuff from around that time, from around like the 40s and 50s and whatever, that have aged like milk. You know, you think of like Looney Tunes, you think of like the Censored 11, you think of like, back in 2025, I reviewed this obscure 50s cartoon called Bucky and Pepito that has a racist depiction of a Mexican stereotype in it. And it's like, I'm pretty sure this character was voiced by a white person as well, which just makes it even worse. You know, it's like, yeah, there's like old stuff that has poorly aged things in it. That I don't know why that's a controversial take. When I was in film school, I learned about this movie that came out in the 1930s called Gone with the Wind, and it's like, supposedly this is a classic and a masterpiece and one of the greatest movies ever made and whatever. And then I look it up, and apparently this movie is extremely racist. So yeah, that's wonderful to know. That's wonderful. Superhero movies are bad, but this is one of the greatest movies ever made. Yeah, I don't know about that one, Chief. I don't know about that one. I think I'll stick with Avengers Endgame. Thank you very much. At one point I became curious to see what this movie was like. I was like morbidly curious to see like the racist stuff in it, and so I look it up. This movie has a 4-hour long runtime, and then I was like, alright, yep, there's no chance I'm doing this. I'm sorry. I mean, it's impressive to make a movie that long considering this was back in the 1930s, but it's like, there's no chance in hell I'm ever sitting through a 4-hour long racist movie. I'm sorry, bro, that's not happening. The bottom line is, there is old stuff that is aged like milk, and so, you know, I don't doubt the original Snow White could fit into that. I mean, again, Disney themselves, they're not innocent from this. There's like a racist stereotype in like Dumbo or something like that. Isn't like, bro, you got Song of the South, man. You got Song of the South. You know, Disney was putting out poorly aged back in the day. Why would Snow White be exempt? Why would Snow White be the only one that's like 100% aged like wine? There's zero outdated things in this movie. Why would Snow White be the exception, honestly? That being said, again, I do think she should have went over this stuff in a more serious manner. Get rid of like the snarky attitude, and I feel like then there would be significantly less backlash. And I feel like it wouldn't really matter all that much because the movie would still be terrible, honestly. Alright, so I'm gonna try and not focus too much on like the many controversies and whatever surrounding the movie itself, which is, I know that's gonna be extremely hard for me to do. You know, I'm gonna be ignoring the many elephants in the room when it comes to this movie. I understand that. But if I went over every single controversy that this movie went through, this video is gonna be even longer than it already is, alright? I don't want that, I'm sorry. I already went through one controversy. that the movie had. I can't go over every single one of them. I'm sorry. I find it incredible the fact that a movie this controversial could also turn out extremely fucking boring. I know that these movies have a reputation for being soulless and whatever, but like there's something extra soulless about this movie. There's something extra about it that's like, yeah, this feels like empty and lifeless and whatever. I think it's the fact that like every fucking thing in this movie is CGI except for Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. It's like the backgrounds are all CGI, the animals are CGI, the dwarves are CGI, and it's like the worst CGI I've ever seen. This is like some Polar Express looking CGI. Bro, Polar Express came out in 2004. This came out 2025. This is like on the same level of quality as the Polar Express in terms of CGI. I don't understand how the hell you can do that, man. Welcome back, Cats 2019. We did not miss you. Okay, fine. I'll briefly go over another one of the controversies that this movie had. Apparently, Peter Dinklage, an actor known for having dwarvism, objected to the idea of like casting other people with dwarvism as the dwarves, believing that it would be like offensive and disrespectful to people that have it. And I guess there were like people that had dwarvism that thought, no, it would be a good thing. You don't really see, like, besides Peter Dinklage, there aren't really that many actors with dwarvism that are like big and popular. And so it's like, this could have been the opportunity for like any like aspiring actor or actress that just so happens to also have dwarvism to see themselves on the big screen, to see themselves in a Disney movie. And it's like, even if the movie wasn't very good, it would still feel like a massive honor to see themselves on the big screen, to see themselves land roles in other movies. And then it's like, that ended up never happening because of these comments. And so what we're stuck with here is this nightmare garbage, man. It's also just excessively yellow as well, which just, I get it, it's supposed to be like sunny and bright, and it's just, I feel like the excessively yellow color scheme just makes it look even more unappealing. The whole time I was watching this movie, it just felt like, it felt unusually more soulless than a lot of the other live action Disney remakes do. And by God, is it so unbelievably boring. Every time a song would come on, I would just immediately like, I would just be like, alright, now it's time for the movie to become background noise. Let the song pass through, play Sonic Generations to pass the time, and then when the song ends, I resume watching the movie. God, I love sailing the seven seas. This movie ended up being one of the biggest box office bombs of 2025. This movie had like an unusually large budget. Well, no, it's not unusual. You know why this movie had a large budget? Because of how much fucking CGI there was. If they had like actual actors play the dwarves, like people with dwarvism play the dwarves, if they filmed on like sets or like real locations or whatever, instead of like CGI forests and stuff, then it's like, then the budget wouldn't be that high. But this thing had like a budget of $250 million, and it just barely reached $200 million. This thing was dead. And I can't say I'm all that surprised that a movie like this ended up failing. The controversies surrounding this movie were more entertaining than the actual movie itself. Back when I was in film school, I had a class dedicated to film history where we learned about like really old like filmmakers and actors and actresses and whatever. I like, Charlie Chaplin, Marilyn Monroe, that sort of thing. And for the end of the year, you would have every student come together. You would have like 2 to 3 students each, like different teams for students. They would like, team up together and work on like a project, a PowerPoint presentation dedicated to like any of these like old, like famous film directors and actors and whatever. People that are like historically important, that sort of thing. And Walt Disney was among the many candidates, the many options. And for better or worse, my classmate and I did not get Walt Disney. Instead, we got Jean Renoir, who was like a French director. If you've never heard of him, don't feel bad. I've never heard of this guy either. I'm sure the movies he made are really good. I don't doubt that. It's honestly kind of a miracle, the fact that the both of us were able to pass, because it was like, this guy made French movies, and it was like neither one of us spoke French, so it's like, you know, this could have been a potential disaster in the making. It's a miracle that ended up not being the case. But anyways, there were like 3 students that got Walt Disney, and so they teamed up to like work on it. And so like when their presentation went up, they went on about like Walt Disney and who he was and whatnot. They went over like, you know, Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, that sort of thing. They went over like certain specific movies that came out during like the Walt era of Disney. They went over like Mary Poppins. I think they brought up Lady and the Tramp, I'm not sure. And then they went over Snow White. They went over like, oh, the Snow White was the first animated movie ever made. It was the first Disney movie. It's considered a classic. It's a masterpiece, blah, blah, blah. And then they played the trailer for the original Snow White. And it's like, I'm trying not to be rude or disrespectful to the people presenting their PowerPoints, but it's like, I couldn't help but start laughing. It wasn't like I was rolling on the floor dying of laughter or anything like that, but I was like noticeably chuckling watching the trailer. And there was like this guy sitting next to me, and it was clear that like we were laughing at the same thing. We didn't say anything at all, but we were very clearly laughing at the exact same thing. It's like I was watching this trailer and I was trying not to be rude or disrespectful, but the only thing I could think of in my head while watching the trailer was weird, and it's like I couldn't help myself. I just started laughing. I hate the fact that if I say this clip makes me laugh, people are going to assume I'm anti-woke or whatever, and that I hate Rachel Zegler or whatever. I have this massive hatred towards an actress just because she doesn't like an old movie that I've never even seen before in my life. And it's like, no bro, I just think it's a funny clip. That's all. There's nothing more to it. Anyways, yeah, the Snow White remake, a pretty obvious inclusion for the worst movies of 2025. I'm just as surprised as you are the fact that this is not the worst movie of the year. When I finished watching this, I was wholeheartedly convinced this was going to be the worst movie of the year. I thought there was no way there could be a movie this year that would be worse than Snow White. And then I ended up getting proven wrong, as evident by the fact that this is only number 3. So let's move on to number 2, shall we? Number 2 is a movie that, despite what the title suggests, is actually broken beyond repair. Number 2 is Fixed, the Vivzy Pop dog movie. Big mouth, but with dogs. This is yet another movie that's like, yeah, of course, this was inevitably going to make it onto the list. I don't know how I could possibly not include it onto the list. Now, right off the bat, I'm just going to say, I'm aware that shortly after this movie came out, the artists and whatnot that worked on this movie were sent death threats and were harassed and whatnot for working on this movie. And I just want to clarify, please do not do that. That is an inexcusable thing to do. This movie is terrible, and it's garbage, and I see no reason to defend it at all. But it's also like, you know, don't harass the people that worked on it. Don't harass Genndy Tartakovsky. Yes, the Genndy Tartakovsky, the man who gave us Dexter's Lab and Samurai Jack. He gave us this garbage. Even then, that does not give you any right to like harass him or any of the people that worked on this movie. At the same time, though, do not try to defend this movie and pretend that it's suddenly good just because a couple people take it a little too far when it comes to like how bad the movie is. I was first made aware of this movie by a video from Moist Critical where he went over the trailer for the movie calling it painfully bad, and so I watched the trailer for the movie myself. There were 2 trailers that came out for it, and I watched both of them myself, and it's like, the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just thinking, oh my god, bro, what the hell is this? This movie just looked exactly like the same kind of adult animation slop that we have been getting nonstop. Like, the whole thing with this movie is just, there's a lot of swearing, and there's a lot of sex jokes, and that's it. That's like the only thing to really make it adult. It's like the bare minimum of adult animation. The ironic thing is, even though this is supposed to be an R-rated adult animated movie, movie, I feel like only kids would find this movie funny. Obviously, I don't want kids to watch this movie at all, but it's like, it has the same sort of like, the humor is too immature and juvenile for an adult to find funny. But like a 6-year-old boy could watch this and find it funny because the dogs are saying no words. There's a lot of pee pee poo poo funny jokes in this movie. It's just so incredibly immature and also just ridiculously disgusting as well. Like, I'm not gonna act like a Puritan or anything like that, but I think this movie goes a bit too excessive with the gross out humor. And so it's like, I am honestly surprised at how defensive some people could be about this movie. I'm honestly surprised at the fact that like this wasn't unanimously hated like a lot of other bad adult animation is. And it's I don't even understand that, because I fail to see how this is any different from your typical crappy, you know, Netflix Family Guy ripoff that gets canceled after one season. I fail to see how this is any different from that. And then the actual movie came out and it turned out exactly as bad as I expected it to be. This movie came out while I was out of town for several days, and so I was unable to review it immediately after it came out. And so it was like, as soon as I got back home, it was like the next morning I wake up early. I wake up at like 6 a.m. in the morning. It's barely sunrise. I wake up and I randomly decide, yeah, okay, I'm gonna watch Fixed now. I'm gonna start my morning watching Fixed. And needless to say, yeah, the movie was exactly as bad as I expected it to be. I have nothing against raunchy, crude humor or anything like that. The problem is that, like, every f***ing piece of adult animation is exactly like this movie. I don't understand the people that try to defend this movie, and it's when it's like, this is literally the same thing as a lot of other bad adult animation. You can't hate Big Mouth and love this. That's hypocritical. I'm sorry. You either love both or you hate both. It's as simple as that. The animation and the voice acting are both good, but then it's like, that just makes it feel even worse, because it's like, there's clearly talent involved in this movie. This movie is from Genndy Tartakovsky after all, and it's like, there's, you know, it just feels like a massive waste of talent. At its core, the movie just feels like a very generic, animals do things when the humans aren't around and the humans don't know what they're doing. It just feels like a very, like, it's like Secret Life of Pets, but like there's a million sex jokes and that's it. I don't know what's more baffling about this movie, the movie itself or the fact that there are tons of people that try to defend this thing. I would come across people saying that, like, if Ralph Bakshi's movies came out today, people would hate them. And it's like, yeah, the thing with Ralph Bakshi's movies is that they came out in the 70s and 80s when this sort of thing was like brand new. The idea of there being like swearing and sex jokes in something animated was brand new. It was genuinely shocking and controversial at the time. In 2025, when this thing came out, it stopped being shocking or controversial. There's a very big difference between the two. If Fritz the Cat came out today and Fixed came out in like the 70s, the reception for both movies would be the complete polar opposite. There would be nothing to make Fritz the Cat stand out from your average one-season Family Guy ripoff slop cartoon. There would be people comparing Fritz the Cat to like Velma and Big Mouth and Has-Been Hotel, and rightfully so. The fact that it came out in the 70s is more or less the only thing making it different from any of those shows. And then I would also come across people who claim that, like, oh, the animation community is hypocritical. They say that they want animation for adults. They say that they want movies and cartoons that prove animation is not just for kids, it could be for adults as well. And it's like, and then they get this movie and it's like they hate it, they think it's a bad movie and whatever, and that makes the animation community hypocritical somehow. And it's like, bro, did you even watch the movie. Like, be real with me. You watch this movie, you realize it has the exact same style of humor as all other adult animation. You watch this movie and you realize it's the exact same thing as Hell of a Boss or Big Mouth or whatever. There is nothing to make it different at all. When people say they want more adult animation, they want more adult animation that's actually good. They want, like, I want adult cartoons that have the same level of writing as, like, Breaking Bad or The Sopranos. I want adult animated movies that are on the same level of quality as, like, a Martin Scorsese movie or a Christopher Nolan movie. I don't want this. This is literally like, it's Big Mouth but with dogs. That's what this is. I strongly believe if Genndy Tartakovsky wasn't involved with this movie, there wouldn't be that many people defending it. At no point watching this did I ever think, oh yeah, I'm definitely watching a movie that's from the same guy that gave us the masterpiece that is Samurai Jack. It's crazy how Samurai Jack is, it kind of is a kid's cartoon. I mean, obviously anyone of any age could enjoy it, and I know the final season was on Adult Swim and not Cartoon Network, but the general target audience for it is supposed to be kids, and yet it's significantly more mature than Fixed. It's significantly more mature than like 99% of adult animation. And as if that wasn't enough, he also has another show called Primal, which, again, I haven't seen it. I still haven't seen it all these months later, but it's like, this is one of the few adult cartoons that actually feels like an adult cartoon from what I've heard. As in, like, it actually feels serious and mature. It's not like there's any swear words or sex jokes being said non-stop. It actually feels like an adult cartoon. And so I feel like that just makes this movie feel even more insulting. The fact that it's just this really gross, unfunny movie. And it's full of like every possible adult animation cliche you could think of. And that's why I'm so surprised at the idea of like people defending this movie. And I guarantee you they're only defending it because it's from Genndy Tartakovsky. If this was from Mindy Kaling, if this was from like the creators of Big Mouth, more people would be hating it. There wouldn't be any defenders. The fact that this was made by someone with actual talent is why people are defending it. And that's what surprises me. Because there's literally nothing to defend about this movie. I don't hate raunchy comedy or anything like that. I love like Superbad is one of my favorite movies of all time. But the difference is that like not every comedy is like Superbad. If every comedy was like Superbad wouldn't be funny. I wouldn't find it funny. And then meanwhile, Fixed is like every adult cartoon is like Fixed. Every like whatever other adult animated movies there are, they're just like Fixed. There's nothing to make it unique or stand out. I've never watched something so unfunny before in my life. Holy shit, man. I refuse to believe that this is a Genndy Tartakovsky movie, alright? No, this had to have been made by Vivzy Pop, alright? There's no way someone as talented as Genndy Tartakovsky could make this, bro. There's no way, man. And yet, despite everything, this is somehow not the worst movie of 2025. It comes very close to being the worst movie of the year, but it isn't. And so, without further ado, let's move on. Now, before we move on to number one, I think it's only right that I give y'all a quick recap of every movie previously covered on this list. Dishonorable mentions go out to Plankton the Movie, Captain America Brave New World, Materialists, Honey Don't, Him, and Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And with that said, let us move on to the top 10 list proper. Number 10, a Minecraft movie. Number 9, A Big Bold Beautiful Journey. Number 8, Jurassic World Rebirth. Number 7, Death of a Unicorn. Number 6, Lilo and Stitch. Number 5, Wolfman. Number 4, Smurfs. Number 3, Snow White. Number 2, Fixed. And the number one worst movie of 2025 is a tie between two movies. Yes, that's right. The number one worst movie of 2025 is actually a tie. I know there will be some people that'll be disappointed by this decision. There are going to be people that'll find this anticlimactic and underwhelming. They're going to think this is a cop out and whatever. And it's like, I get that, but at the same time, it is near damn impossible for me to decide which one of these two movies it's worse. It is near damn impossible for me to decide which one of these two movies do I hate more. And so I decided at the end of the day, you know what? I'm going to have it be a tie. The number one worst movie of 2025 is a tie between War of the Worlds and Hurry Up Tomorrow. I had to think real deeply about which movie I hated more, and it was just like I couldn't do it. And so I decided to put both movies together as a tie. I watched Hurry Up Tomorrow in theaters. Hurry Up Tomorrow is based on The Weeknd's album of the same name, and when I watched it, I was so offended at how bad this movie was that I had to make a review of it. I understood that this was like a bit of a left field kind of movie, out of left field movie. It's very different from the kind of movie I typically review, but it's like, I thought it was so bad that I had to make its own review on it, and I declared this to be the worst movie of 2025. And then around like, I believe August or so of the year, around like August, September, I don't remember, a little movie would come out on Amazon Prime Video called War of the Worlds, and almost everyone was like, yep, this is the worst movie of 2025 actually. And I didn't get around to watching this movie myself until around like the end of near the end of the year, basically around like December. That's when I finally watched this movie. I understand I'm extremely late to the party, but hey, at least I made it. That's all that matters. And so it's like, while I was watching War of the Worlds, I had to think as well, is this worse than Hurry Up Tomorrow? Do I hate this more than Hurry Up Tomorrow? And then it was like surprisingly really hard for me to determine which movie I thought was worse, because there are advantages to both movies. Both movies do have their own separate advantages. Hurry Up Tomorrow is obviously a much more competently made movie than War of the Worlds, but War of the Worlds is also more funny bad. There are more enjoyably bad moments in it. There are moments in War of the Worlds where I laughed at how bad this movie was, and I mean, it's not enough for me to call it a 100% so bad it's good movie. I've seen people say that War of the Worlds is going to become the modern equivalent to The Room and Birdemic, and I personally don't see that. I don't think there are enough funny bad moments in this movie for me to call it the modern day equivalent to The Room. A lot of the things that make this movie funny bad at first, they become very old and very stale very quickly. And so it's like, yeah, there are more enjoyable moments. There are more ironically enjoyable moments in War of the Worlds when compared to Hurry Up Tomorrow, but it's like, the funny bad moments, they dry up pretty damn quickly, and then what you're left with is a movie that's just mostly insufferable to sit through. The one thing that these two movies share in common, the one reason I decided, no, you know what, both of these movies should be tied together for number one, the one similarity that they have is that they are both incomprehensible movies. It is impossible to understand what is going on in either of these movies, for different reasons, mind you, but still, it's not easy understanding what either of these movies are trying to tell you. However, I know there are going to be a few people that will be shocked at what I'm about to say, but to give War of the Worlds a very, 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 very tiny bit of credit, at least War of the Worlds has a f***ing storyline. At least War of the Worlds has a plot. It has a very poorly done plot. It does an abhorrent job at telling the storyline that it wants to tell, but at least it has a storyline. Hurry Up Tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't have a storyline at all. This was the only movie on the entire list that I rewatched for this video, because I was still in disbelief at the idea that a movie this bad, a movie with a storyline that's just this non-existent, could possibly be made. And indeed, I was just as confused at this movie the second time around as I was when I first watched it. Hurry Up Tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned, has no storyline. At least there's like the things that happen in War of the Worlds. A lot of the things that happen in it, it feels like they have a reason to be happening. In Hurry Up Tomorrow, things just happen for the sake of happening. Nothing is ever explained or acknowledged again after a certain point in time. It's just, it just goes unexplained. Now, I have a feeling this segment is going to be a bit long considering the fact that I'm talking about two different movies at once. So to start this off, I'm going to be going over War of the Worlds and what makes it a bad movie. Now, right off the bat, I am going to admit that I know next to nothing about War of the Worlds, the general story of War of the Worlds, any of the other, like, adaptations for it. I know nothing about War of the Worlds. I know that in 2005, there was that Steven Spielberg movie with Tom Cruise in it, but I've never seen this movie. And I also know as well, back in, like, the 1930s or so, there was, like, this radio broadcast of War of the Worlds from Orson Welles, the director of Citizen Kane, and it made people believe that like there was actually an alien invasion going on. It made people think that like aliens were going to take over the world. People thought it was real, and besides that, I know next to nothing about War of the Worlds, and after watching this movie, I feel like I know even less about War of the Worlds than I already do. I'll admit, I was very late to this movie when it came to like watching it. I watched this movie for the first time in December of 2025, near the end of the year. This movie came surprisingly very close to not being on the list, because I believe that I didn't know if I could squeeze the movie into the list or not. When I was working on my worst movies of 2024 video, I had finalized the list of movies that I wanted to talk about in that video. It was 15 bad movies, and I was gonna go through all of them just like that. And then the Oscar nominations came out around like January or so, February, I don't remember. And there was a little movie that got a whopping 13 nominations named Emilia Perez, and almost immediately there was a lot of backlash surrounding the fact that this movie got a lot of nominations, because supposedly this was a really terrible movie, and there was a part of me that wanted to skip out on it, but then there was also another part of me that decided, yeah, I'll just watch it and see what the deal is. I ended up watching the movie on the exact same day that the Oscars were being held, and indeed I thought it was a terrible movie. And so at the last second, I had to rework the list to include Emilia Perez on it, and I had a very strong feeling that War of the Worlds could have turned out like this. A movie that's just like, it has to be added in last minute, basically. I came very close to deciding, no, I'm not going to add it onto the list. I'm gonna save it for a later video solo, and I'm gonna have Hurry Up Tomorrow on its own be number one. For better or worse, that ended up not happening. So the movie follows Ice Cube, who works at the Department of Homeland Security, and the movie more or less takes place in his entire computer. Like, you see him on a webcam, you see him, like, there's moments where you see, like, him on a webcam on the corner of a screen, like I'm watching a PewDiePie Markiplier video from 2013, and more or less the whole movie is just him going through like different websites, opening up different browsers, different things on his computer, different files, etc. And I know that there are movies that have a very similar style to this. There are movies that are like this, where it's like they're told exclusively from like a computer, from like someone's webcam, whatever. I know that there are movies that do this, and I don't care how those other movies do it. I hate any movie that does this by default. I don't care if they do it much better than this movie. This movie feels very claustrophobic. I don't know how much sense that's gonna make, but I just get this very, like, cramped feeling watching this movie. I mentioned before, both this and Hurry Up Tomorrow are impossible to understand what's going on in them. And with the case of War of the Worlds, again, at least War of the Worlds has a storyline. I'll give it credit for that. But it's like, it does an awful job at telling that storyline. It feels too cramped and claustrophobic. The whole thing is like Ice Cube goes to this website, and then he goes to this website, and then he calls this person, and then he calls this other person, and then he texts this person, and then he calls back this other person, and then he texts another person, and then he goes onto this website, and it's like extremely confusing and hard to follow. There's also too many things that are going on at once in this movie, and if this was like a normal movie, I feel like it wouldn't feel bloated or anything like that. It would feel normal, but because of the very cramped claustrophobic style that this movie has, it just feels really off. It feels too bloated. It feels too cluttered, a lot of the stuff. There's this whole thing where it's like Ice Cube's character's daughter is like having a baby shower or something like that. I don't remember. And he's like this overprotective father to her, always checking on her, always, spying on her, making sure she's not doing anything bad, that sort of thing. And then you have her boyfriend who's like an Amazon driver, and he's played by Devin Bostick, aka Roderick. This guy has quite the fucking filmography, I must say. The Diary of a Wimpy Kid trilogy, Oppenheimer, and War of the Worlds. Holy crap, man. And like Ice Cube is making sure that he treats her well, that he ends up being a good boyfriend to her. And then Ice Cube has another son who's like, his whole thing is he's a gamer, he plays games, and then he's like, no son, you gotta stop playing video games, you gotta start getting a real job and whatever. And then it's like, it's very like cliche shit. Like I'm watching a movie from 2009, but this movie came out in 2025, and so these are like extremely old cliche tropes. If I remember correctly, this movie was actually made back in 2020 during the pandemic, and for some reason it wasn't released during that time. It wouldn't be released until 5 years later. I'm not sure if that's 100% true that this movie was made during the pandemic, but I could see it. This very much feels like a pandemic era movie, which makes the fact that it came out in 2025 feel even more pathetic than it already is. This is yet another movie that doesn't feel like it's from 2025, except this time it quite literally isn't from 2025. There's also this like anonymous hacker who believes that like the government is lying, and he wants to expose the truth about the government. These aliens come to Earth and start attacking it, and it's like really awful looking CGI. Ice Cube is looking at videos of like people filming the aliens, recording the aliens, live recording it, whatever, and it's like there's moments where like they're trying to run away from the aliens, and it's like the camera is like constantly shaking, and it hurts to look at. It is just so like, it gives me a headache, combined with like the weird like claustrophobic style that the movie has when it comes to like, yeah, the whole movie is on Ice Cube's computer, and that's it. The whole movie takes place on Ice Cube's computer. And then I guess it turns out the government knew about this. They were doing something relating to data that would like, they knew that it would attract aliens to Earth, but they end up doing it anyways. And then it turns out Ice Cube's character's son is the hacker that he's been looking for, and so he ends up teaming up with his son to take down the government, to stop the aliens, to send them back. And it's like, if this was a normal styled movie, it would be fine, but like the claustrophobic feel of this movie, having it take place entirely within Ice Cube's computer, it makes it a headache to sit through. If there's one good thing I could say about this movie, it's that Ice Cube's acting is hilariously bad. I'm not surprised at all that this movie became a meme shortly after it came out, because there are moments where I started laughing at how bad Ice Cube's acting was in this movie. It was funny bad. I found it to be enjoyable. Unfortunately though, as I mentioned beforehand, there are not enough funny bad moments in this movie for me to call it the modern day equivalent to The Room or anything like that. It's not consistently funny bad. A lot of times throughout this movie, I'm not sure if I could be able to show it properly because of copyright and whatever, there are moments where it's like Ice Cube is highlighting something and it's like it either like zooms into what he's highlighting or it like moves to the screen or whatever. It like there's like movements, like zooming in, camera movements, whatever on the computer screen, and every time it just looks so comically fake. It looks so hilariously fake. Like they didn't even try to make it look legitimate. They didn't even try to make it look good. I thought this was funny for like the first 5 minutes of the movie. And then the realization kicked in that the entire movie was like this. And so it was like almost immediately it stopped being funny. It was like this movie started off being really funny, and then it didn't take long before it started to give me a headache. And how could I possibly forget about the large amount of Amazon product placement in this movie? This was the one thing that I knew about this movie prior to going into it. Roderick Heffley over here, in addition to being the boyfriend of Ice Cube's character's daughter, no, I cannot be bothered to remember their names. Quite frankly, I don't care enough. The characters in this movie are more or less non-existent. There's almost no reason to care about any of them at all. But in addition to him being the boyfriend of the main character's daughter, he's also an Amazon driver, an Amazon worker. And you can tell this movie is a work of fiction because he seemingly enjoys being an Amazon worker. And it's like near the end of the movie, there's this whole thing where they have to get this like important thing to where Ice Cube is, to like where his location is. They have to get this like important thing, but none of the characters are able to go outside because of the aliens. And so Roderick hatches up an idea to just get this like drone delivery thing from Amazon to get the package to Ice Cube's location. And it's like it is the most shameless product placement I've ever seen. Holy I thought the Burger King stuff in A Big Bold Beautiful Journey was bad, but this is next level, man. And then there's like a scene where we see like them flying the drone. We see like Roderick flying the drone, and then like it hits something and it falls down, and it's like there's like a homeless guy nearby, and they try to get in contact with the homeless guy, and they ask him, hey, can you go and pick up the drone for us? And he's like, no, I don't want to risk dying by the aliens. And then like they end up bribing him with like a $100 Amazon gift card, and then he's like, okay, sure, I'll do it. And it's like, are we for real right now? Are we like doing this really now? Unfortunately though, even with all of the very funny bad things in this movie, it is not enough to save it. It is not enough for me to say, oh yeah, this is the next so bad it's good cult classic movie. If you genuinely want to go into this expecting a hilariously bad movie, just don't waste your time. There's probably like tons of videos on YouTube that compile all of the hilarious bad moments in the movie. You could just watch those instead of watching the whole movie. Watch like a video compilation of like Ice Cube's bad acting, and it's like, there you go. You got all of the funny bad moments of the movie without watching the actual movie yourself. You watch the actual movie, all of the funny bad moments will dry up, and you'll end up with a massive headache because of the the awful style of the movie and how seemingly bloated and cluttered the movie's storyline feels because of the style that it has. And so with that said, let us move on to the other number one worst movie of 2025, Hurry Up Tomorrow. I tried to rewatch Hurry Up Tomorrow for this video. This was the only movie on the entire list that I rewatched for this video. I couldn't even make it past 37 minutes of the movie, which is honestly much farther than I expected. This movie is an hour and 45 minutes long, and I couldn't even finish it. I only got to like 37 minutes, and that was it. I decided no more. I was done. I know it's very common in like a negative review for a movie. It's common to say like, oh, this movie was a waste of time. This was like a bad movie. I wasted my time watching this movie. That's sort of thing. This movie genuinely, honest to God, feels like a waste of time. You get nothing out of watching this movie. This is genuinely like, I don't know who this movie was made for. I genuinely don't know who it was made for. People that aren't into The Weeknd, or like casual Weeknd fans, people that just like his songs whenever they come on the radio, people who only know the big hits like Blinding Lights or Can't Feel My Face, they're going to despise this movie. People that aren't familiar with The Weeknd's music at all, they're going to despise this movie as well. Even die-hard fans of The Weeknd, I cannot see them loving this movie because it is that bad. This movie has no storyline. I was in disbelief. The first time I watched this thing, I was in disbelief that it didn't have a storyline. And then I rewatch it briefly. I tried to rewatch it, and again, there was no storyline at all in this movie. There are things that happen in this movie, but they happen seemingly for the sake of happening, and that's it. There's no reason for any of it to happen. Much like with War of the Worlds, the characters are just like, they're non-existent. There's no reason to care about any of the characters at all. They have no personality, nothing to say about them. Like, in addition to The Weeknd, you also have Jenna Ortega in this movie. She's like the second main character, and it's like, she has no character at all in this movie. Like, she has no kind of personality, no character in this movie, nothing like that. I guess it's like, it's supposed to be like she's an obsessed fan of The Weeknd, but the movie does an awful job at conveying that, if that's the case. It's just, she's a character in the movie, but she has like no personality of any kind. I don't even know her name. I don't even think they say her name once in this movie. The movie starts off with her pouring gasoline all over her house. At least I'm assuming that this is supposed to be her house. It's like a really dirty, nasty looking house, and she's going around pouring gasoline around the house. She's crying her eyes out while doing so, and then eventually she lights the house up on fire, and then she drives away. And you would think, okay, maybe they'll explain why she did this at some point in the movie later on. They'll resolve this whole thing. No, they don't do that at all. This whole thing of her burning down her house, it's never explained once. You're left with more questions than answers. Why did she burn down this house? Why was she crying while doing so? What happened that would compel her to do such a thing? It's never explained at all. It just happens for the sake of happening. You know, I there's probably people that are like, they're too obsessed with The Weeknd to see that this is a terrible movie, and they're gonna be like, no, bro, you don't understand. This is like symbolic. This is metaphorical. And it's like, what the is this symbolic of? What's the allegory that the movie, like, what am I supposed to take away from this? What's the hidden message behind this scene? The first time we see this character, she's doing something unusual, and then the movie never explains why she did it. That's bad writing. I'm sorry. And I want to clarify something as well. I love The Weeknd. The Weeknd makes great music. I'm not saying this to be like, oh, I hate The Weeknd. I think he has no talent or anything like that. No, The Weeknd is genuinely one of the best modern day pop stars, if not the best, you know, easily top 5, top 3. But then it's like, when it comes to his acting, between The Idol, that short-lived show that he had, it's like, yeah, my man cannot cook when it comes to acting. I'm sorry. And then speaking of The Weeknd, there's this whole thing where he's recovering. He's trying to recover from a nasty breakup with his ex. He's constantly listening to this voicemail that his ex left him, where she goes on about like, oh, you're a horrible person. Your mother will never forgive you for the things that you've done. And it's like, again, none of this is explained. None of it is ever explained, like, what happened between him and her ex. What happened? Like, what does The Weeknd's mother have to do with all of this? You never see this character at all. You never see The Weeknd's ex at any point in the movie, nor do you see his mother. So it's like, it just feels like a weird thing to include in the movie to highlight, oh, your mother would be so disappointed in the person that you are. Something important that I want to bring up, something that y'all should keep in mind, is that in this movie, The Weeknd is playing The Weeknd. He's not playing a character. He is playing a fictionalized version of himself in this movie. It's not like with The Idol, where he played Tedros or whatever his name was. It's not like that at all. In this movie, it's The Weeknd playing The Weeknd. There is a noticeable difference between Tedros and The Weeknd. There is almost nothing to distinguish The Weeknd from Hurry Up Tomorrow, the movie, and The Weeknd from real life. They are more or less the same person. And he's recovering from this breakup with his ex. And again, this is like a seemingly important thing in this movie. And it's like, it's barely explored at all. The movie doesn't go into any detail as to what happened between the two of them. He's very clearly demotivated by all of this. And it culminates with him leaving this lengthy, angry voicemail where it's like, you don't know anything about me, you stupid bitch. I am better than you because I'm The Weeknd. I'm a fucking legend. Everyone is going to remember me while nobody is going to remember you. And it's like, the first time I watched this movie, both the first time I watched this movie and while I was trying to rewatch it, I just couldn't stop thinking, this movie makes The Weeknd look like a horrible person, which, like, you know, maybe that is the point. Maybe this was deliberately done, but like, even if it was deliberate, it just comes off as really questionable. This could have been easily prevented if he was playing a character in this movie. If he had like a different fake stage name or whatever for this movie. But then it's like, no, this is just straight up The Weeknd. This is like a fictionalized version of The Weeknd in this movie. And it's like, while watching this movie, I just started thinking, you know what? I don't think I want to listen to Blinding Lights anymore. I don't think Save Your Tears is a banger anymore now that I think about it. I have no idea what the hell they were going for with this, to make a movie like this and have it be like, oh, The Weeknd is like an awful, horrible person. It's like, imagine if there was a movie where Michael Jackson played a fictionalized version of himself, and in the movie, he was portrayed as a nunce who was obsessed with underage boys and girls. You know, that's kind of what this is like. Imagine if there was a movie where Kanye West played a fictionalized version of himself, and he was like obsessed. In the movie, he was obsessed with like the German man with the funny mustache, and he was wearing German man with the funny mustache imagery. And you know, the sad thing is, I could kind of see this movie happening. I could kind of see it coming into existence. Unfortunately, it just comes across as a very weird, very questionable thing to do. And oh yeah, the Weeknd is not very good as an actor. Extremely talented musician, extremely awful actor. We all know the infamous scene where he and Jenna Ortega are arguing, and the Weeknd's like, shut the f*** up, shut the f*** up, and he sounds like super zesty about it. It's like he's supposed to be like angry and pissed off, and instead he just sounds considerably annoyed at worst. It's one of the very few funny bad moments in the entire movie. There's also a third main character played by Barry Keoghan. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, I'm not sure. And he's The Weeknd's manager. He's probably like the only character in the movie that has any sort of character, any sort of personality. Like, every other character is just like, they're just there and that's it. But then with Barry over here, it's like, he kind of has a character. He's the only character in the entire movie that has any sort of conclusive arc. And then everyone else, it's like, the ending of this movie is genuine dog shit. Oh my god. Just wait and see for this, okay? Just wait and see. The pacing for this movie is also abhorrent. The movie begins with The Weeknd doing like a concert performance where he's singing one of his songs from Hurry Up Tomorrow, and it's like, it's a great song. The one of the only good things about this movie is the music, but I don't know if I want to count that as a redeeming quality because I feel like it's cheating, you know? I could just listen to Hurry Up Tomorrow, the album, without ever acknowledging the existence of Hurry Up Tomorrow, the movie. And it's like an extremely long scene that just goes on and on and on. And then it's like there's another scene in the movie where like The Weeknd is previewing like an unreleased song to Jenna Ortega's character. And again, it goes on for way too long. It's like it goes for at a snail's pace. It goes for way too long. And I must remind y'all, this movie is not a musical. There are songs in this movie. This movie is based on an album, but it's not a musical. And honestly, I never thought I would ever say this, but I kind of wish that it was a musical, genuinely. There's a scene near the end of the movie where Jenna Ortega, I kid you not, tries to be like Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. She ties up The Weeknd to a bed and she starts going over all of his songs. Like she puts on Blinding Lights and she goes on and on about how, oh, most people don't know the meaning of this song. It's actually secretly about how you blah blah blah. And it's like, girl, you're not Patrick Bateman, okay? You're never gonna be Patrick Bateman. It's one of the only other funny bad moments in the movie because of how much it's trying too hard to be like American Psycho. And then it stops being funny because this scene continues to drag on and on and on. She doesn't just do this for Blinding Lights. She does the exact same thing for like 2 other songs as well. And then Barry Keoghan comes in wanting to see The Weeknd and Jenna Ortega ends up murdering him and that's it. That's the last time we see this character. I find it very interesting the fact that the only character in this movie to have any sort of character, any sort of personality, the only character to have a conclusive arc, and he also has the least amount of screen time when compared to The Weeknd and Jenna Ortega. And then finally there's a scene where Jenna Ortega goes up to The Weeknd, pours gasoline over him, and plans to light him up on fire. And just as she's about to drop the lighter, The Weeknd starts singing this song, and it's like the longest song ever in the world. It's like, holy crap, I didn't know The Weeknd made progressive rock. I had no idea. I thought he only made pop music. And then the movie ends with him walking away from the burning hotel room without Jenna Ortega in sight. And that's it. The movie ends just like that, leaving you with more questions than answers. Notably, where the hell did Jenna Ortega's character go? What I thought this movie was trying to do was, it was trying to pull a Fight Club, where it was like, oh, The Weeknd, it was just imagining Jenna Ortega's character. Jenna Ortega's character doesn't actually exist. It was all in The Weeknd's head. In the same way, it was like, Tyler Durden doesn't exist. It's all in Edward Norton's head. But given the quality of everything else relating to this movie, I think it's more likely that this is just the movie having awful writing rather than it trying to rip off Fight Club. And even if that is the case, even if it was like the movie is trying to be like Fight Club, it's like ripping off one of the most famous plot twists in movie history isn't gonna make people think that your movie is good or clever or well written or anything like that. This is only gonna come off as shocking and surprising to people that have never seen Fight Club. Unfortunately, I want to imagine the people that were unfortunate enough to see this movie have also most likely seen Fight Club, so that ends up not working at all. The guy who directed this movie put out a really good movie all the way back in 2019, so it's not like he's some pretentious hack who thinks he's the next Christopher Nolan or whatever, the next Martin Scorsese, anything like that. This guy put out a really good movie in 2019, and so I really doubt that he would just casually rip off one of the most beloved movies from one of the most beloved directors of all time. I forgot to mention this until now, but there's also another subplot in this movie where it's like The Weeknd has this issue with his throat that like he has to rest, he has to like take a break from touring, take a break from singing in order to have it heal. And apparently this was based on like a real thing that happened to The Weeknd in real life. life in 2022. Apparently at a concert in 2022, The Weeknd lost his voice, and I believe that was like one of the things that inspired the creation of Hurry Up Tomorrow. And so it's like, at least it feels like this has a reason to be in the movie. At least it feels like this has a reason to be in the movie. And then it's abandoned midway through, and it's never properly resolved, ever. The last half of the movie takes place in this hotel suite with Jenna Ortega and The Weeknd, and it's like everything that was established in the first half of the movie is never brought up or acknowledged ever again. The Weeknd's breakup with his ex, it's never acknowledged again. Jenna Ortega burning down her house and crying while doing so, never brought up again. The problems that The Weeknd had with his throat, never brought up again. It's like, why put this stuff into the movie if you're going to do nothing with it? While I was rewatching this movie, I also found it to be a visual eyesore to sit through. There were a lot more flashing lights, flashing imagery in this movie than I remember seeing in theaters. And so it's like, Jesus Christ, man, this movie is boring, pretentious, incomprehensible, and it's hard to look at. You could very easily get seizures watching this thing. What the is up with this movie? Holy crap. I'm almost convinced this movie was made bad on purpose. I'm being serious, man. I have sat through a lot of bad movies. There are very few movies that actively make me angry. Hurry Up Tomorrow makes me angry. This is not a movie. This is like the antithesis of everything a movie should be. It tries to be all pretentious and artsy-fartsy. It tries to be all deep and symbolic and whatever. It has all of this like cool imagery and whatever, but then it's like none of it means anything. There's no meaning to any of it at all. There's a scene where it's like The Weeknd is outside in this like desert, I believe. I don't remember. And he's like standing in front of a large campfire, and next to him there's this kid that's there, and it's like he then wakes up and he sees he's tied up to a bed and Jenna Ortega's in front of him, and then it's like, what the does this scene mean? What's the symbolism behind this scene? What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's style over substance. It's a cool looking shot, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't matter. Honest to God, if I had to choose which one of these two movies I would watch a second time, I might go with War of the Worlds, because at least War of the Worlds doesn't try to be a like super smart, serious, deep, artistic, artsy-fartsy, pretentious movie like Hurry Up Tomorrow. Hurry Up Tomorrow tries to be deep and thought-provoking and smart and whatever, but then it's like, none of it means anything. It is the textbook definition of style over substance. Everything in this movie doesn't matter. Nothing in this movie actually matters. The whole time I was watching this movie in theaters for the first time, all I could think was, what the hell am I watching? What am I supposed to take away from this movie? What am I supposed to learn from this movie? This is a nothing movie. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel after watching this movie, because it's barely even a movie. It's very competently shot, I'll give it that, but it's like there's no storyline in this movie. There are things that happen in this movie, but they just happen for the sake of happening. There's no actual reason for any of it to happen. The fact that it tries to be a smart, deep, artsy-fartsy movie, ironically enough, just makes it even more insulting to my intelligence, to the audience's intelligence. I look at a movie that's supposed to be stupid and dumb and whatever, and it's like, I go into it knowing that it'll be a stupid, dumb movie, and so it almost feels redundant to criticize it for being a stupid, dumb movie, because it's not trying to be a high-tier work of art, a masterpiece, or anything like that. And then meanwhile with this, It's like it's trying to be smart and deep. Could this movie classify as Oscar bait? I feel like this movie, I don't really get heavy Oscar bait vibes from this movie, but I do get them a tiny bit. This movie feels like it's like artsy fartsy and pretentious for a reason. Like it feels like it wants to be Oscar bait. This movie is so bad that I'm pretty sure it can't even fully commit to being Oscar bait. Jesus, man. I truly hate this movie. Hurry Up Tomorrow is tied with War of the Worlds as the worst movie of 2025. It is also maybe the worst movie I have ever seen, if not one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I'm not sure. It's definitely up there as one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and it is for sure one of the worst movies ever made. Easily. If I ever started a film school myself, I would use these two movies as a perfect example, two polar opposite examples of how not to make a movie. It's incredible how these movies are very different from each other quality-wise, and yet they're very much the same in terms of how much they fail at being proper, normal movies. Jesus Christ, man. Jesus Christ. And there you have it, folks. The top 10 worst movies of 2025. I apologize for the length of this list, but I do have a tendency to get into detail about the movies that I talk about. I wasn't expecting this to be an exception, but even then I am surprised by how long this video turned out. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see y'all next time. Adios.